From Righteous to Villain. Chapter 101, Approach. Ivessa woke up late, way into the day already. She had never before woke up at a time when it was already afternoon, getting closer to night, just so she would have to return to sleep again. Moaning, she shielded her eyes from the light that filtered through the drawn curtains of her bedroom, feeling the after-effects of drinking a bit too much were stronger than usual. Turning onto her back, she lay still for a few seconds, blinking at the ceiling. Her mouth tasted of stale wine still, while her temples did not throb exactly, but there was a faint pressure behind her eyes, enough to be annoying. Ha! With a slow exhale, she pushed herself upright, forcing her to wake up already. The bedclothes slipped from her shoulders, and the room came back into focus piece by piece. There was a narrow writing desk beneath the window, covered in ledgers and sealed notes. Opposite her bed, the wardrobe was standing slightly ajar, while the silver washbasin on its stand next to it was filled with the clothes she had worn last night. Wonderful, she murmured to herself, rubbing her eyes. I knew I shouldn't drink that much. But it was not the wine that made her grimace when she swung her legs over the side of the bed, but the report she received after. She could almost see how Garrick had sat there, across from the city lord, pouring not just gold, but property. Their property and leverage. And dignity no less, right onto the felt. The losses. She didn't even have the heart to go through it all after they left the Swan. But tonight she will have to, and maybe it was that which made her head hurt and not the aftermath of the wine. The fact that Garrick had walked into the Swan, even if they had no other choice. They could have been careful at least. But no, he had to leave with less than he had brought in. He gambled with the Ledger's future, everyone's future. At such a critical moment, it was more than foolish. Rubbing her face, Ivessa stood up and crossed the room, splashing cool water onto her face. The shock of it sharpened her mind at once, feeling the droplets run down her cheeks and along the sharp line of her jaw before falling into the basin. She looked up at her reflection in the small polished mirror above it, seeing clear anger in her reflection. For more than 10 years, she had helped grow the Crimson Ledger. She was not good with weapons, so she never fought. She wasn't a man, so she never did it with threats. She wasn't even beautiful, and she knew that, so she never did it with charm, but she had a good head and a great amount of patience. That's how she helped the Ledger grow, with records and numbers, through paper and pen instead of sword and blood, as that was Cedric's job. Since he died, she moaned, realizing that everything had begun cascading since Garrick let him loose. Another bad decision because the butcher butchered someone else's property. It was a bad day to be her, and she knew it. She knew that while men like Garrick liked to imagine themselves as conquerors, it was people like her who made those conquests sustainable. Someone had to know which dockmaster had been bought, which merchant's son had a gambling debt, which river routes could be trusted in flood season or exploited by a bought bandit group, which informants lied for less, and which lied only when they were coerced. Someone had to make sure that their growth was sustainable, deal with eventual losses, and convert those into something that would become an advantage later. Did I do all that for nothing? Wasting away my best years? She asked her reflection, but there was no answer. Apparently, because just in the span of a few bad months, she had begun to feel as if she was standing in a counting house built atop rotting beams, being told not to worry because the chandelier still looked expensive. What a farce. Yes, Garrick had always been volatile. That was nothing new. He had always confused intimidation with control, but it was at least contained, or seemed purposeful. Ugly, yes, but directed at critical points, she marked, and that had made men fear him. And then they used that fear to keep the machine moving in one direction. Turns out, when getting up from a fall, Garrick didn't know how to continue or change ways. He would soon ruin the Ledger forever. "My lady," came the servant's voice from outside, "you have a visitor." Ivessa frowned immediately. A visitor? Who? She asked sharply. A boy. Her first instinct was irritation, but before she could open her mouth, her second instinct had kicked in. Caution. "No one is admitted here without a name," she said calmly as she began to dress. "He did not give one," the servant answered, sounding uncertain. "He only said he was asked to deliver something into your hand directly." Ivessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Now that was suspicious. Keep him in the entry hall, she said. I'll be down presently. By the time she got down, she wore a dark day dress, something simple but well made. Her hair was pinned back, her spectacles cleaned, and by the time she descended the stairs, all traces of sleep were gone from her face, looking as usual. Noticing the delivery boy waiting in the entry hall, she was sure that he could not have been more than 10, maybe 12. And she was sure she knew that face. Lady Ivessa. The boy suddenly stood, smiling. Yes. She nodded, searching for the name, because she knew that the boy was connected to a name somewhere in her head. I was told to give this only to you, he said as he brought one hand forward and held out a sealed letter. The wax was dark and stamped into it. There was a simple, unmistakable curve of an S. Who gave you this? She asked, taking it. I don't know, my lady. A lie, not a very good one, but where are you from? She tried. Me. He blinked once, pointing at himself. The city. She nearly smiled, shaking her head. Of course you are. Ivessa dropped the questioning and turned the envelope over in her fingers, rubbing it, noting that it was a very fine paper. A meeting request? Or a threat disguised as one? What could it be? With another sigh, she broke the seal, and inside was a single folded sheet. The handwriting was neat and not one she had seen before. Ah, it was indeed a meeting request, with a place, an hour, and a set of instructions. A confectioner's parlour in one of the better districts, where she should arrive alone, order a drink and sit by the rear window. Then, wait. That was all, with no name, no further explanation, and with no signature. When she looked back up, the boy was still standing there, patient as a nail hammered into wood. Was there a message besides this? No, my lady, the boy smiled. Thank you, she said, and studied him for one more moment, then nodded toward the door before giving him a gold piece. You've done your work. The boy just smiled as he pocketed it, then bowed again, and left without another word. Ah, a thought had come to her just then. Puck. Yes, that had to be the boy's name. She just didn't remember which report she'd read it in. By the time she left her townhouse, the sky had shifted toward a deeper evening. Velgrada's streets glowed amber beneath many lamps' lights, while carriages rolled over wet stone as she walked the cobblestone streets. The confectioner's parlour was exactly where the note had said it would be, with a tasteful frontage and 2 big frosted windows. Warmth welcomed her at once when she entered, along with the fragrance of caramelized nuts, coffee, and baked dough coming from the kitchens behind 2 swinging doors. The inside was softly lit, with 2 older women sitting near the front, sharing a plate of cakes and speaking in low voices. A merchant and his wife occupied a side booth, while a young server polished cups near the counter. Without wanting to look lost, she approached the rear window exactly as instructed, took the empty chair beside it, and the server came over promptly. What may I bring you, my lady? Coffee, Ivessa said. Black. The girl nodded sharply and departed, while Ivessa settled back, her every sense awake, searching for the trap, the enemy. She knew she wasn't the best at spotting enemies, and that she would look obvious in trying so. It was why she did not turn in her chair, did not scan the room too openly, but tried to listen and move her eyes as much as possible. Soon the coffee arrived, and sipping it, minutes passed. It had been long enough that she began to wonder whether the true purpose of the meeting was not to speak with her, but to test whether she would obey commands. She was just about to curse when a voice came from behind her. It was low but male, she could tell that. But it sounded distorted, making her shiver and almost jump in her seat, splashing some coffee on her fingers. Don't turn around, it said. Thank you for coming. You make a habit of summoning women to sweet shops with unsigned letters, Ivessa asked coolly, forcing her voice to be even. Only the competent ones. That narrows the field considerably, she shot back, not backing down. Good, the voice said, not at all offended. I'm glad that you're in the correct mood. Since I am already here, she said, putting down her cup, leaning back to hear him better, you may begin explaining why. It's simple, the man behind her replied. You should know what Garrick lost last night. I am the one who knows the numbers in the ledger. Her gaze sharpened, though she kept it on the dark reflection in the window glass. I know it. You just think you do, the voice said with a chuckle. He did not report all of it, she asked. I bet not, especially not the secrets he lost. How much? She asked, her fingers trembling, holding onto the table. Enough to warrant murder. That is not a number, she whispered, inhaling through her teeth, making it whistle. Be specific. The voice obliged, of course, and it laid out, one by one, the number of gold, per round, per win, and per loss. Then, warehouse rights, city properties, canal accesses, trade secrets, and blackmail opportunities. And to make it worse, some of what he lost had gone not to enemies in abstraction, but to men whose names Ivessa knew, whose loyalties could shift under this newfound power. They may break off, further weakening them. By the time the voice finished, her face couldn't decide if she wanted to be green, yellow, or white. In the end, she turned scarlet, fuming from undiluted, pure rage. It wasn't the kind of thing Garrick indulged in by breaking furniture and screaming at subordinates. It was colder. More like she wanted a knife in that man's back. 10 years. 10 years spent helping build the ledger into something capable of rivaling the city lord himself. Yes, the ledger was older than that, but before her, they weren't on the path to taking over. It was her life. How do I know this is true? She asked at last, her voice shaking. You already do. It is. The man behind her said nothing more, and he did not need to. The fact that the man knew all those secrets that Garrick sold, no, not sold, lost, that was proof in itself. Still trembling, Ivessa looked into the window's reflection again, but all she caught was the vague outline of movement. Someone seated behind her and slightly to the side, positioned so that even if she turned quickly, she would get little more than a coat sleeve and a hat's wide brim. What do you want? She asked. A functioning ally, he said at once, and that almost made her laugh. You want Garrick removed, she stated clearly, and her voice sounded surprised, but appreciative when he answered. Thank you for understanding. She thought of the books in her study, all the accounts, the routes, the names, who would stay loyal, who would not. Her anger did not cool at all, it just got sharper. He will not go quietly, she said. Go, the voice asked. He has to die. Then why tell me this? Ivessa asked, gulping, and when the voice behind her answered, it softened just slightly. Because competent wives should not be the last to know when a fool they call a husband is burning down their own houses. Ivessa closed her eyes for one brief moment, almost laughing at that, but then she opened them again. She felt strangely relieved. I'm listening. Looking towards the window in its reflection, though she still could not see his face clearly, she saw the faint incline of a head from the man behind her. Well then, let's chat a bit more. Chapter 1. 102. Promise. The bakery that had been the starting point for Lyra and me had been closed since the work began with the Swan. But now, with everything running smoothly, it was time for its rebirth. The bottom floor was completely stripped down, the wood panels taken out, the stone smoothed, and the ovens cleaned, ready for a complete makeover. Before the second floor would be empty just the same, we decided to rest here one more time, as it was one of our first homes in this city. I was lying on my back, one arm resting lazily around Lyra's shoulders, gently caressing her skin. No lantern or candle was on, but the darkness now felt anything but dangerous, especially after what we had just finished with. Everything felt pink and soft. Lyra shifted slightly beside me, her cheek resting against my chest as she exhaled with satisfaction, making me chuckle. I reached up and played with her hair that had come loose sometime earlier and now spilled across her back and me, her new pillow. It felt wonderful. For a while neither of us spoke, and I listened as her breathing slowly steadied, a soft shiver running through her now and then, still making her chuckle here and there. Whenever it happened, I absent-mindedly traced my fingers along her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin, and remembered that I once dreamt of something like this. What are you thinking of? Lyra murmured softly, hugging me a bit closer. Is it that obvious? I asked, glancing down at her. Yes. She whispered, I heard your heartbeat shift. It was so obvious. Was it something bad? She tilted her head slightly, looking up at me, wanting to see my eyes. Bad? I chortled. After what we did? How could that be bad? You know what I meant, she snorted, hiding her laugh. It wasn't anything bad. Tonight went better than I expected, I answered, holding her chin, raising her head to kiss her lips. I believe you, she whispered after we separated, and it seemed she was getting into the mood once again, as she began rubbing herself against me, just like how the whole night started. Girl, what stamina. If you are still thinking of work, you didn't have enough of me, she muttered, showing that she was gearing up for a second round. I wasn't thinking of work, I shot back, running my hands down her back. Quite the opposite, in fact. Then what were you thinking of? She asked, curious, and be honest. About my past, some past events. I said simply, things that I failed at. Failed? She asked, now already on top of me, crossing her arms on my chest, glancing down into my face. Like, nothing serious, just… It is serious, she interrupted me. I can feel it, so tell me, please. I had a girl once, I started, and she didn't flinch at all while I spoke, just listened, while my tongue got looser. Do this and do that kind. Auriel, do this for me. Auriel, come with me here, Auriel. We need this, meaning she needed it. Auriel, why are you not here when I need you? Work? What do you mean money doesn't grow on trees? I can see she left a bad mark on you, she muttered, her eyes still looking into mine. Did I help you get rid of her memory? Well, she added before I could say anything, apparently not, because you just brought it up. Oh, I already forgot about it. She gave me a broken heart, but I managed to piece it back together, you see. I joked, but, well, it did kill me, so… Oh well, it's in the past, I don't need to dwell on it. It was done, over, left in a different life. She was a bitch. Whoa, that's some real anger, I laughed, but she just pursed her lips, then sat up on me and… well, down on me, moving her hips while placing her hands on my chest, still gazing down into my eyes. I will make sure you don't even think of her again. You are doing great in that department. I grinned, reaching up and holding her waist, but I let her lead it and dictate the rhythm. Is there anything that you wanted to do and she didn't? She asked between hot, excited breaths, suddenly slowing down her hips, feeling my reaction at once through our connection. Tell me. Just tell me, I will do it. You know, I trailed off, blinking my eyes, and suddenly it all came out of me, without filter, without even thinking about it. I once dreamt about having kids. My own kids, you see. For a moment she stopped, and when she began moving again, she was much more forceful, leaning forward, holding my face with her hands as our noses touched. I will do it, she whispered, still looking into my eyes. I will give you as many kids as you want. She wasn't lying, and when she kissed me, she was more passionate than ever before, and I welcomed it. Without reservations, the next morning was probably the best morning of my life, both lives. We lazed around for a long time, then washed up and walked out to have breakfast at a nice place, before just going on a walk, without any aim, really. We were back in the Swan by early evening, watching it run smoothly, Lyra and I heading upstairs to my office so I could tell her everything about the meeting between Ivessa and me. The previous day was about us, so I intentionally avoided bringing it up. You really think she'll work with us? She asked me while pouring tea for both of us, after I told her everything. I do, I answered while staring at the cup. From what I know now, she's the reason the ledger grew as much as it did in the past decade. Not Garrick. Garrick is the reason people feared the ledger. I snorted. He may have been a good businessman once, but the past years, just look at how they acted. Fear is not for building anything, she muttered, sitting down in my lap. No wonder they are falling apart, but are you sure this is a wise decision? I don't know if it is wise, I muttered, holding her waist, but I can notice if someone wants out, like their alcoholic, panic-stricken member, or one who wants to save what can be saved. So she'll turn on him. She nodded, taking a sip. She already has. I smiled. She just hasn't said the words out loud yet, but she listened to me, agreed with what I offered, and I am sure she wasn't faking it. She will act as I asked her to act. That's a dangerous game. Do be careful, okay? Everything is dangerous, but don't worry, I am sure of it all. This one has the best odds, and you know, the house always wins. Don't start gambling with things you can't afford to lose, she warned me sharply, but then leaned down and gave me a kiss. But I do trust you to know that. So, what about after Garrick is out of the picture? After Garrick, I exhaled softly, tapping the side of my cup. It should be the time for the ledger to stabilize, Ivessa takes control of what remains, and we turn them from an enemy into a useful neighbor. Not an ally. You don't trust her for that? No. I said at once, I don't. But I don't need to. If I want to have a long-term place in this city, I will have to stay in the middle, not an ally to the city lord, not to the ledger, not to anybody. Silverhaven is the example I need to follow, so I need to balance Valcroft out. That's why the ledger won't and can't be wiped out. You know, she giggled, you can be such an evil guy. Maybe. I grinned at her. Well, that's why we also have to rope in Auriel the alcoholic. That's not a nice title. I know, but it is what it is. I grunted as I emptied my cup. He will play perfectly into our hands, even after Ivessa takes over. We will still have him in our pockets and can keep our ears and eyes on what is happening with and within the ledger. I see. And what's up with the bakery? I guess it's not just a grand renovation, because I told you I miss baking stuff. It is a gift to you. But yes, also I want to reopen it. You do remember what I planned it to be, before the opportunity for the Swan came about? I do, she nodded. And now it's time to do it? Yep, I continued. Don't worry, it will be a real bakery, a proper one with everything you need, including the bigger ovens and a few apprentices, just for you. Maybe even a nice cozy storefront that doesn't look like it survived 3 wars. Are you putting more and more responsibility on me? What a cruel husband. She moaned as she gave me a playful glare. You asked for it, I shot back, tickling her. Well, she giggled, wriggling in my lap, I could teach people. Train them well, as we trained the kids. Then we can have deliveries going across the city now, not only just within the district, like at the start. And, she added casually, it would be the perfect place for information exchanges. A bakery is perfect. I still believe that, I nodded, continuing. No one questions people coming and going. Why are they there? What are they doing? Especially if we once again begin delivering to houses. Plus, our clientele now may include the wealthy. It will do good for the neighborhood. What do you mean by that? She asked, unable to see it. Money comes in, money goes out. I explained simply, the way to stay in power is to win over the hearts of the regular people. They are the perfect shield, even against someone like the city lord. We can start paying for renovations. After we turned the bakery from its current look to something much more lovely, appealing, but not overly fancy, we can do the same for the other houses around it. Just like that? She looked at me stunned. Just like that. Wheel. I smiled slowly. Not exactly just like that. We would require a certain level of loyalty and cooperation, maybe access to a cellar or an attic now and then, asking them to ignore it, not to see it happen, to get or not to get involved. You see, the benefits for the people there would be great. Better roads, security, nice homes. What is there that they shouldn't want or love to have? Nothing. I see, she muttered, thinking it over, and then smiled again, watching my eyes. You are a villain, putting everyone living around the bakery into your pocket, making them owe you a debt that they can't repay. Seems like it, I shrugged, not denying it. Do you dislike it? I don't care, she answered quite powerfully. I am yours, Auriel. Remember what I told you last night? She whispered, kissing me again. I will be with you. Always. It is my decision, so as long as you stay the man I love, I will stand with you. Chapter 1. 103. Offers. With the frenzy of the tournament passing, the nights within the Swan returned to a kind of normalcy. As normal as a night could be, with added interest from visiting merchants, that is. Thanks to the spreading news, the casino's daily income increased even more, which surprised me. I was expecting that there would be a kind of plateau for this, leveling out, but apparently we hadn't hit it yet. I was curious when we would, because nothing can grow forever. Oh well, I won't complain about it. From where I stood at the back of the main floor, leaning slightly against the bar, I watched the main hall with a smile. It was another full night with a handful of foreign faces present. My staff moved with ease between the rows now, no longer making a misstep or getting nervous. Everything had become second nature, including how the kids kept passing notes to each other about all the talks they heard and picked up, working my little system so I could afford to focus elsewhere. Auriel. Hearing the voice calling out to me, I turned to look at Marcus, who had sat down at the bar, looking a bit nervous for some reason. I smiled at him, waiting for him to continue. We need to talk. For a few seconds he said nothing, but seeing that I wasn't answering with anything, waiting for him to continue, he let out a troubled shrug. It's about that fatty. He finally contacted you. I smiled, feeling that it was indeed time for him to try and snake his way back to my casino. Merrick is more anxious than I expected to be so quick about it. Yeah. Marcus let out a short breath through his nose as he said that, shaking his head. And the creeps were on me when he contacted me. He added as he scratched the side of his jaw, clearly annoyed, playing with his stubble. At first he was acting like nothing happened. No surprises there. I huffed a quiet laugh, imagining his face. Of course he is. If we ever meet again, he will do the same with me, I'm sure of it. I know, Marcus continued, waving his hand around. I'm not a newbie, but it still caught me off guard because he was slimy. He came in all friendly, he explained, shaking his head. When I let him in, inviting him into my office, he sat down like we were old trading partners. He didn't even complain about the quality of the wine I offered, downed it in one go, and started talking business, routes, opportunities, discounts, and people he knows and would love to introduce me to. He was offering me more than I had ever seen in this city. Did you grab the opportunity? I asked with a smile. Not yet, he answered firmly, but I am now considering a few. I'm just careful. A bastard like him is dangerous. I don't want to get stabbed, burnt, or ruined in any way, shape, or form, so I'm playing it safe. I was about to suggest that, I nodded, pouring some drink for us both. And then, Marcus spoke again after taking a sip, his tone flattening a bit. He called me colleague. His colleague. A promotion, I joked. Congratulations. Don't start, he groaned, grimacing. It felt wrong. It couldn't be that bad, Marcus. You are also a seasoned veteran, I said, encouraging him slightly, sloshing the drink around in my glass. I'm a veteran inside Velgrada, but this is a different level. He muttered, but still, he didn't sound that troubled either. Anyway, he's testing the waters, and I noticed that he was a bit disappointed that I didn't jump in. That's even better, so take good advantage of him. Marcus shot me a look at that, but I just emptied my glass. He won't respect you if not. He will walk over you if you let him. Of course, don't go too far. He will hold a grudge if you do. That's what I'm afraid of, he muttered. And then silence settled between us again for a moment, filled only by the distant sounds of the casino floor, someone winning a big pot, going by the cheers. Well, shaking himself a little, Marcus finally continued, blinking his eyes to refocus them. He didn't push too hard at first, just small talk while trying to build rapport between us with his opportunities. But then, he exhaled slowly, he got to the point. Now I am truly interested. And, what did he say? He says he has something. Already? I asked, genuinely surprised. That was fast. It is a snake. He nodded, looking into my eyes. I don't know if it's the snake, but why else would he bring it up? He knows that I know, and we all know what this is all about. I don't know what strings he pulled, but he says he has it. My smile widened while hearing it. There it was. The big fat fish, eating the hook, dragging the line. It has to be it, otherwise he would make a fool of himself. I spoke up, after considering it. I guess he knew you would come to me with it. And to do it this quickly, I can tell he is very much nervous about it. He didn't say a lot more than that. Marcus emphasized it once again. It can still be a bluff, so I would be careful, because the fatty himself is a snake. That he is, I snorted in agreement, and he's trying too hard, which was my goal anyway. Yeah. Marcus shifted slightly, his expression softening. He also said, well, not really stated it, he was a bit more cryptic, but I understood his intention. He said he'd be willing to make things right with his generous offer, and he'd gift it to us. He didn't say me or you, he used us. Ah, I see. I hummed, scratching my chin. Sorry, we may just accept it. Did he offer anything else? Yeah, but those were offers for me. And did you accept any of those? I asked, my tone sharpening just slightly. Please. Marcus immediately shook his head. No, of course not. For a moment I simply looked out over the casino again, thinking what to do. I could milk this, but just as I advised Marcus to be restrained, I also don't want him to hold grudges against me. I am not looking to turn an advantage into someone who wants to stab me in the back for some stupid reason. But just accepting the snake as a gift is a bit too easy. I should pull on his belt a bit, make him squeal enough to blame his temper before blaming me. He's desperate, Marcus muttered, seeing my absent-minded gaze. Yes, I mumbled while still thinking, and you're enjoying this way too much. Naturally, I didn't deny it, finally blinking and looking back at Marcus with a smile. He made a mistake, and I am making a profit. I'm making him understand that his temper won't be a good trait to flaunt against me. I will just make sure I use it against him. So what now? He asked with a sigh. You take the offers he presented, the ones you feel fine with. I am not going to tell you what to do. It is your business, and I am not here to puppeteer you. We are partners. I tapped my fingers lightly against my arm while answering him, wanting Marcus to stay a friend and to prevent him from feeling like he was working for me and not with me. That's it? For now, I chuckled. You're not going to meet him? No, I laughed. Why should I? It's not time yet. Then what? He goes through you anyway. I continued while Marcus went still, then groaned because he thought his part was finally over. Of course he does. You're the bridge between us. I thought you understood this. I grinned, making him roll his eyes. I don't want to be the bridge. The fatty is too heavy. You are stronger than you think. Keep overestimating me, and we both fail, he muttered as he rubbed his face. This is how people get stabbed, and that hurts a lot. Not this time around. I pushed myself off the bar, stretching. Listen carefully. Just make sure that you will not let him think he's forgiven yet. And if he pushes, then you remind him of the fact that I hadn't accepted the snake yet and that nothing has changed. Let him offer extra with it, and we will do a few rounds of back and forth. Make sure he understands I'm listening to his offers, but ignoring them until they satisfy me. Have the big trader bring out what he has, instead of us asking for it. When I feel like that, I will be compensated enough, and then I will accept his apology. Until then, let him pamper you. Don't say it like that, please. Sorry, I grinned, but I'm up for a bit of mischief here. And apparently I wasn't the only one feeling like that. Just after closing, I had a visitor. It was someone I had never seen before, and when Kravik and Rian finally ensured the woman was safe and legit, someone with a message, they led her to me. I'm listening, miss. I sat down at the bar again while Kravik stood behind her and Rian began pouring a drink for us, also keeping an eye on the scared, middle-aged woman. My name is Jalaria. I am Lady Avessa's personal assistant and head maid. Oh, I nodded, raising the cup to my lips. And what could we help you with? You see, we are just closing, and it is pretty late. Late? Kravik chuckled, towering over the sitting woman who barely reached his chest when standing. It's almost dawn, boss. It's way too early, in fact. Semantics, I laughed, waving his comment away. It's the same. So, Miss Jalaria, please let's get to the message, because we both know you didn't come here to say hi. My lady didn't put anything into writing. She was too afraid that anyone would intercept me. I also had to make sure I came when nobody would be looking, not even Garrick. Yes? I asked, keeping up my smile, wanting her to continue and get to the point. I actually felt sleepy and wanted to snuggle up with Lyra already. My lady, she faltered, then took a deep breath, wanting to say everything as Ivessa ordered her to. She wants to offer a cooperation and peace treaty. Cooperation? Really? Kravik snorted, but I just glanced at him before looking back at the woman sitting before me. Cooperation in what? I asked with a smile that probably looked colder than I intended. In getting rid of Kravik and the restructuring of the Crimson Ledger. My lady is offering her full cooperation in this, change. She only asks to have the slate swept clean when the new leadership takes over and reforms the ledger. That is a big thing to ask, I answered, after about a minute of silence, seeing the woman starting to sweat while sitting there. Does your lady expect us to get our hands dirty? No, she said at once. She told me to make sure that you don't misunderstand. It would be them removing Garrick from his position. But she asks for help in securing the ledger's assets until the transitional period ends, especially against the city lord's people. I see. I nodded, crossing my arms, keeping up a smile. Well, Kravik, please, make sure Jaleria here gets back home safely. She wanted to say something, but Kravik was already helping her to stand. Don't worry, I looked at her before she was led away. Tell your lady that we promise that we will do the best we can in helping her out with it. Chapter 104, Gone. Kravik did not let our messenger linger for much, and the moment I gave the order, his hand settled on her shoulder with enough firmness to tell her there was nothing else to discuss. I watched as Jaleria stiffened slightly under it, her body betraying the tension and fear she had been holding back from emerging since the moment she stepped inside the Swan. While she turned, Rayan was already ahead of them, pushing open the front door, looking around, making sure there was nobody else there, watching before she was escorted out. For a brief moment, she hesitated at the entrance, and I noticed her eyes flick back toward me. Maybe Ivessa had asked for something else, or more concrete evidence to bring back. But I gave her nothing beyond a faint smile. Kravik nudged her forward then, not unkindly, but with enough insistence to break the pause. After that, she allowed herself to be led again, stepping out into the slowly thinning darkness without another word as the door closed behind them, and just like that, the Swan returned to silence. I think there will soon be a more peaceful transition amongst the powerful, something that I was hoping for, which is going to be good for both business and fame. If they could really get rid of that idiot and reform the ledger, Velgrada might become peaceful, and I would have a hand in both forces, the most influential ones within its walls. I will just have to keep the balance up between them in the future. Thinking about that, I exhaled slowly, scratching my chin, fantasizing about what I should do next, or after it happens. Well, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. That offer came quicker than expected. Rian, walking back to me from the front door, leaned against the counter, folding his arms loosely across his chest, stifling a yawn. She moved fast, he said after a moment. I mean, that woman who will lead the ledger. Can they really pull it off? Good question. I shrugged as I let out a quiet breath through my nose, the corner of my mouth lifting. Hopefully they are. Because the moment he is gone, we don't need to worry about much anymore, just accumulate more of our wealth and keep growing. That's all. Yeah, he hummed, smiling. That would be great, boss, because if we can keep earning like we are doing now, oh boy. Don't expect it to go forever, I warned him, but still I was also smiling. But yeah, it's nice. Though I will have to spend most of it, because just sitting on a pile of gold is for dragons, not for us, humans. Money is for spending, he agreed, chuckling to himself. I love that part about it anyway. And no. He glanced at me with one eye. Not on booze. I'm thinking about buying a quality weapon. Suit yourself, I answered, stretching. Just don't put yourself into debt over it. Kravik returned not long after, the door creaking open to my upstairs office as he pushed it in again and stepped inside the room. I was going over today's haul while he yawned and cracked his knuckles once, then again loosening himself as he plopped down in the chair opposite me. His expression was relaxed, indicating there was no trouble and that everything went smoothly. She's clean, he said simply. I was watching extra carefully. There were no tails attached to us, no sneaky bastardly watchers. At least none that I could pick up on. That is a good start, I replied, nodding once, looking at him, while he studied me for a second longer than usual, his gaze narrowing ever so slightly. You trust her? No, but I was the one who planted the seed in Ivessa, and it's now blooming, so we will go along with it and exploit the situation to our advantage. What if she turns into another Garrick? He asked, leaning forward and taking a bottle from my desk, raising it to his mouth. Then I would be disappointed in myself. I huffed out a quiet laugh, but my eyes drifted back toward the paper in my hand, counting the numbers. I think I could read her right, and this will go down without a hitch. When it does, we will support them in the transition, make sure the city lord doesn't bring down the hammer, and maybe even lend them some money. With interest, I hope. Naturally, I smiled. She won't have a better option anyway. I dare to invest in her and the ledger, and I will be honest with you. I leaned back, grinning. I won't mind turning her future ledger into a subordinate. Kravik raised a brow at that, gulping down the strong alcohol and wiping his mouth. Meaning? He asked, a bit lost. Do you mean the same thing as how we have… Marcus? Kinda, I nodded. I am not planning that far ahead now because it's still too volatile a situation, but I would prefer to have them than not. They already have established roots and connections as they grew, and if we can restructure the ledger and force them to be indebted to us, we can use those channels to reach outside of the city. I need that, and right now Garrick is more of a hindrance than a leader. He is not valuable for a conglomeration like the ledger. He is bringing it down, and I think Ivessa can persuade the others to see it her way. I hope you are right, boss. Pumping money into them feels like throwing it into a well. We have to take risks, I shrugged, standing up and stretching. With how we earn per day, we can afford it. Oh well, that will be enough for today. Time to have some rest. He didn't argue, and after we were done, we locked up and I headed home. When I stepped into our room, I found Lyra still awake and probably waiting for me as she sat on the edge of the bed, brushing out her hair. A single candle burned beside her, its flame small but warm, casting shadows across her bare shoulders and along the curve of her back, her waist. And she looked beautiful, standing out against the rest of the room, which was swallowed in darkness. She glanced up the moment I entered. "You're late. Did something happen?" she asked with just a tinge of worry in her voice. "I was intercepted," I replied, closing the door behind me, and I began to undress. "Something dangerous?" she asked, turning fully towards me, stopping brushing her hair. "No." I smiled, watching her as she did the same before she blushed and pouted. "What?" "Nothing," I said teasingly. "Tell me." "You are beautiful." "I know," she answered, making me laugh while she giggled too, reaching out to me, pulling me into bed. While I reached out, idly catching a loose strand of her hair between my fingers, and began telling her what happened. Ivessa had contacted us. "Oh, already?" That was fast. What did she want?" After I told her everything, she didn't argue against any of my decisions. She simply agreed. Then I told her about Marcus and Merrick's situation, making her more excited, because if we get that damned snake, she can finally have a proper demonstration in potion making. Still, I had my doubts about whether that crazy hobo bastard could actually make a potion. But, oh well, worth a shot. I just hope things keep working out as they have now. When Auriel's answer reached Ivessa, she did not rush to act. There were many variables she had to prepare for. Even though Garrick was more feared than loved, and many would be happy he was gone, there were still people inside the ledger who would side with him no matter what. Those loyal to Garrick had to be contained, and those loyal to the ledger had to be converted to her views. Just like before, she went to work and scoured all their remaining contacts and partners, marking names one way or another. For 2 days, she worked quietly, almost invisibly, and without any sleep. Messages were sent, but not through official channels, avoiding Garrick's eyes and ears. Nobody questioned why orders came from her, as everyone was mostly used to it by now, and not even Garrick noticed that some of the most loyal people he had remaining were somehow sent out of the city on sudden errands. By the 3rd day, Garrick still sat at the center of the ledger. Like an actor, getting ready for the finale, just not knowing about it. As for the meeting itself, it was easy to arrange, and Garrick, even in his current stage, agreed when the message reached him for an immediate emergency review. Probably because Ivessa made sure she mentioned the post-tournament losses, saying that the numbers were not adding up. So she knew Garrick would come and smooth it out. The lying bastard. She was sure he thought this would be another conversation in which he would raise his voice, dismiss her concerns, and leave believing he was still in control. Well, this time, he thought wrong, and Ivessa chose the location carefully. It was not happening in their main hall or at the offices. Instead, she selected one of the smaller underground private rooms, set up with a low table, 2 chairs, and a side cabinet with some food and bottles of old wine. Naturally, she arrived first, as the room was already prepared by her beforehand. The table cleared, the chairs positioned exactly as she preferred them, angled slightly, not directly opposing each other. She made sure it felt less confrontational and more conversational. With how on edge Garrick was, everything mattered in this critical moment, but she was determined to pull through it. On the table, she placed 2 glasses, took a deep breath, and watched the clean crystal cups, biting her lips. No turning back, she muttered and placed a bottle of deep red wine beside them. She didn't uncork it yet. Instead, she pulled out a syringe containing odorless, tasteless liquid and stabbed it through the cork, emptying its contents into the bottle. When it was gone, she hid the empty syringe and took out a round pill, putting it under her tongue, letting it slowly dissolve and coat the insides of her mouth. When it was almost gone, she began swallowing hard, letting the somewhat foamy, sour-tasting saliva go down, landing in her stomach. Just to be sure, Garrick arrived exactly 7 minutes later. The door opened with force, showing that he was still angry, his boiling presence filling the room before sitting down, barely even looking at Ivesa. "Well," he demanded, "you said this couldn't wait, so get this over with. I already told you everything anyway." "Sorry, but it really couldn't." She looked up from her seat, her expression trying to stay calm. "This better not be another lecture," he muttered, fixing his vest. "I've had enough of those." "Well," he gestured, "talk. You know we have a lot on our hands to be wasting time here." Ivesa did not begin immediately, though. Instead, she reached for one of the glasses and slid it across the table toward him. "Wine?" she asked. Garrick glanced at the bottle, raising a brow, then looked back at her, the glasses, and for a moment that passed, way too slowly, Ivesa was afraid he got suspicious. But then he grabbed the bottle and uncorked it, smelling its fragrance. "Fine," he muttered, and it meant who knows what as he poured it out. He didn't even bother filling her cup, as he took a long drink without ceremony, swallowing deeply before setting it down with a dull clink. Ivesa couldn't believe her eyes, but she didn't dare stare too hard. She was sure he would make her drink first, but no. And even if he made her waste a very expensive antidote, that didn't matter now. It was done, and she was now in charge. It happened way too fast, but it made her feel more relaxed than she could recall in a very long time. "You lost more than you reported," she said, suddenly very brave about the situation. "I told you." Garrick's expression darkened instantly. "You didn't." Her voice didn't rise, but with how hard it was, it cut cleanly through, interrupting him, which was a first. "You questioning me now?" He stared at her, his irritation flaring into his head and onto his face, making it red. "I am, and I'm correcting you and our records." "Careful!" Garrick leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing, as he said slowly, "You're forgetting your place." "No." Ivesa met his gaze without flinching, as she said quietly, "You are." Garrick opened his mouth, probably to shout, but then he stopped, and a moment later his brow furrowed. He shifted in his seat, his hand brushing against the edge of the table, as if the room was starting to spin. "What?" The question came out slower than before, feeling himself getting weird. His body was recognizing something was wrong before his mind could catch up, and when it did, Garrick straightened abruptly, his jaw tightening. "What did you—" But then again, his voice cut off as his hand moved to his throat by reflex. "You're a fool," she said, her tone unchanged, watching him without blinking as his eyes snapped to hers. They were very much wider now, understanding beginning to bloom in them. But it was too late. "You—" He tried to stand as the chair scraped across the floor, but his legs did not obey him. They faltered instead, all of his strength slipping away. He caught himself on the table, knocking the glass aside, watching as it rolled, spilling the remaining wine across its surface and dripping onto the floor. "What did you do?" "I protected the ledger. From you." "You," he choked. "Traitor." "No," she interrupted with an angry snort. "That's you." "You think this changes anything?" "It changes everything, yes," she answered without pause, watching him struggle. If you want to die, go alone. Don't bring everything down with you. By then, his grip on the table weakened, his fingers slipping against the wine-soaked wood. He tried to steady himself, to gather whatever strength remained in his body, but it was already too late. He sank back into the chair, his chest rising unevenly. His gaze grew unfocused now, struggling to hold on to anything, not just the room itself. As it was happening, Ivessa watched him, feeling relief and satisfaction. "You went off the rails," she said quietly. "Just die and let me save our—" "No, my ledger." His lips moved to say something, but he could no longer form words, and the last thing he could hear was, "Goodbye, Garrick." She just sat there, watching him twist and spasm, and only a minute later, take his last breath before going limp, his eyes becoming dull, unfocused, and empty. It was like that, the man who wanted to challenge the city lord and take over past, without any grandeur, killed by his own. Chapter 1. 105. Rising Influence. The week passed very quietly, which was not something I was against. It was good to have a bit of tranquility after everything, but it couldn't keep on for long, of course. Why would it? Especially not with knowing what was going on in the background. At first, I noticed some weird rumors the kids brought back about how Garrick disappeared from view, went into some kind of reclusive mode, or whatever else they began whispering between themselves. Naturally, it started with those who had contact with them, as their subordinates began guessing what that meant and what the Crimson Ledger was planning, but I knew better. It was the first sign that Ivessa had made her move and succeeded, because Garrick wouldn't just be gone without a word. As for me, I was telling my people to keep an eye on them, more than on anyone else before. I knew that anyone with enough planning and the will to follow through could remove a man. But what mattered was everything else that was coming after. That was the hard part, and where I wanted to watch how Ivessa was handling herself, to see whether the ledger was going to be held together or fall apart at the seams. Well, I had to say, Ivessa had made sure it worked out even better than I expected. Not only was there no news, but also no news of any more subordinate factions defecting, dissolving, or speaking out against them. Instead, there were many much louder voices coming out and supporting the ledger, signing renewed permits. And lastly, silently disappearing Garrick followers. She was ruthless and efficient, at least it looked like that from where I stood. His death is still not out in the open, right? Rian's voice came from beside me as I stood inside the Swan one night, pulling me out of my thoughts. "No," I answered, smiling. "Not yet. Let's leave it up to Ivessa to announce when she feels like it." "Huh." He exhaled through his nose, holding a drink, which when I looked turned out to be juice. "Feels strange. The girls are happy about it, though. I am too, but they are even more fired up." "I heard." I nodded, letting myself laugh a little, remembering their beaming faces when they realized what happened. "Well, at least we can take a breather and start focusing on becoming a proper force in the city. Then who knows? Maybe spread out a little." "Big plans, boss?" He grinned at me. "Can't wait." "Yes, you can," I chortled. "We will never rush things. Look at Garrick. He is the prime example of what happens when you begin hurrying things. Patience was something we had to exercise and make sure we won't be the second coming of Garrick. I won't become like the ex-leader of the Crimson Ledger, killed by his own people, or by his paranoid raging, depending on how you looked at things. The only thing he could be happy about this whole affair, watching from his afterlife, is that apparently his company will pull through it all. Their shipments still moved around, with enough of their contracts still holding their weight to keep them in operation within the city. "She's holding it together better than I expected," Rian muttered, breaking the silence and my train of thought. "That's because you only know Garrick's way of handling things." He glanced at me, hearing me say that, raising an eyebrow. "You can already see that she's not him. I've seen businesses run by multiple people, and some simply are not cut out for it. Turns out she is. So it was a good choice to make our move through her." I wasn't lying. The ledger looked more stable without its former leader than it ever had with him, and that was reinforced by the news that reached me just a day later. Kravik had brought it to me, telling me it had been sent directly to me, So I took the bundle, walked into my office and sat down, spreading them on my desk. One of these bundles contained a thick handbook, which to my surprise was a copy of their current, ledger. Of course it wasn't filled with everything, only what she felt like sharing, as she wasn't a fool, but she knew I would ask for details if she wanted my help. She went ahead and prepared everything, precisely enough information for me to see the direction she was taking, and right enough bookkeeping for me to understand where my money was going. If I was going to invest in her, naturally they could be faked, but that was my part of the risk, and I am running a casino now, so a little bit of gambling will always be in the cards, eh? Smiling to myself, I picked the booklet up, flipping through the pages slowly, my eyes scanning the numbers, the routes, the names, everything she included in there. I made notes of her adjustments, calculating her losses, realizing she was making sure they were minimized, mostly by having their assets redistributed between remaining members. Honestly, she was doing really well at nudging numbers, shuffling ownership, finding back doors in the city's laws, avoiding taxes through them, and assessing the likelihood that Valcroft could forcefully step in and repossess their assets. She was making sure that if or when the city lord makes a move, they will only shed the least amount of skin, or tail, like a lizard. She's good, I muttered to myself, licking my lips. Damn. Better than good, she is super efficient. My old boss would have loved her to work with him. Well, turns out she was exactly what the ledger needed to survive. Now, when Garrick's death becomes public, she will be ready to fend off the attacks that are bound to come. I was thinking of that when someone knocked on my door, which made me raise a brow because I wasn't expecting visitors. Come in. It opened slowly, and to my surprise, there she was. Ivessa herself. Huh. I did not think she would come. Watching silently, she stepped inside, dressed in simple clothes and a hood, probably coming in incognito. She was keeping her posture straight, but her eyes were tired behind her glasses, like someone who hadn't slept in a week. Yet despite it all, she was still looking fired up. Auriel, she greeted me with a bow, while I gestured to her to sit down, watching as Kravik, who escorted her up, stayed at the door. I hope things are as you expected. Ivessa, I nodded, setting her ledger down with a smile. You did a fantastic job. For now, she muttered, allowing herself a small smile and short sigh. We're ready. Well, as ready as we ever could be, for letting people know that Garrick is gone. Oh, I leaned back slightly in my chair, raising an eyebrow. That fast? It has been a week, she replied with a moan. I made sure the hardliners are gone, and we can't really keep it a secret anymore. I bet you heard the rumors. They began guessing it. Yeah, I chuckled. We had people coming to ask questions too. The price I had set for it alone told them enough, I think. That is why I barely slept. She leaned closer, placing a new folded document on the table between us. The last of the major assets has been secured, she said while looking at me. The remaining variables are manageable, so it is foolish to try to deflect the rumors anymore. They will know anyway. In the end, I picked up the document and quickly skimmed it. Inside, there were marked routes, holdings outside of the city, even in different regions, along with hundreds of names, all grouped into 3 different tables. Secured, unknown, hostile. They are less hostile names in here than I expected, I admitted. I had to work hard for that. Because of Valcroft, I smiled, making her shrug. Because of everyone. Garrick made a lot of enemies. Fair. That was the truth, after all. With a smile, I folded the paper and set it back down, examining her, while she began fidgeting in her chair. I could tell there was more, and I knew precisely what. So, I said, when do you announce it? Tomorrow. If I wait longer, it becomes worse and worse, with more outlandish rumors to spread and muddle the waters. If I move now, I can craft the narrative, and I will say he had a heart attack. With the stress we went through until now, it won't be a strange thing to go through. Mm-hmm. I nodded, but that's not why you are nervous, so what can I do for you? I asked, leaning onto the table, steepling my fingers, hiding a growing smile. Well, she fell silent, taking a deep breath. We need a major investor. The next day, Velgrada woke up to some massive news, which of course was that Garrick Holvar was dead. The announcement spread like wildfire, with everyone wanting to know the details, feeling both incredulous that his heart had given out. However, by the mouths of those who were at the VIP table, participating in the poker tournament, came the rumors that he did look like someone on the edge of a mental breakdown. Then, those who came to us asking for details got it after paying. The news was real and confirmed, even if some still doubted it. By evening, they also knew, naturally, that Ivessa had replaced him. And, to everyone's surprise, a few days later, she showed up at the Swan, standing at the entrance. I made sure that I was there, watched as her carriage arrived, the wheels rolling to a smooth stop before the entrance. Kravik, after I nodded at him, stepped forward, opened the door, offered a hand to help her down, then formally introduced her to me, while I welcomed her in. "Auriel," she said, just the same, bowing her head, because this was a show for everyone watching, so they would know my stance on her new position. "Lady Ivessa," I replied, making sure that my smile came easily, genuine enough to be convincing. Or should I say, leader of the Crimson Ledger? Titles are just that, titles, she said at the end, while I just kept on my smile, inviting her in. "Welcome to the Swan. I hope you will enjoy your stay more than your predecessor." "I am sure that I will." And it was like that. Confirmed that she was the new head of the Crimson Letter. Just a nod, that was what it took. With that, she stepped inside, walking by me, while the murmurs started almost instantly, as the room began to realize who had just entered, and more importantly, who got the welcome from me personally. That was the main reason behind this in the first place, giving her the first legitimacy directly from me. And in the future, I expected everyone who wanted to amount to anything to ask for my word to legitimize their power, more so than a permit from the City Lord. Chapter 1. 106. Visitors. The news that overshadowed the death notice of Garrick came almost at the right moment. I was among the first to learn about it, yet still, by the time I had told the others, it had also already swept through half of Velgrada. It was like a wildfire fed by dry twigs in a sickeningly hot summer. As for what it was about, well, it was like learning that the city would soon host the World Cup or something, and I was amongst those who were invited to sit in the VIP box. Because Silverhaven had made an announcement of an auction, I was in my office when the invitation arrived, as I was reading yesterday's full reports, Marcus's latest news, and trying to decide when to get our snake and allow the fatty back in. The numbers were good, better than good in fact, so I was feeling generous and was about to tell Marcus to pull the trigger on the deal, as he was also offered a lot more benefits by now, and I had a feeling we shouldn't push it any further. Just as I was finishing writing a letter of my own, wanting to send Puck over to him with my instructions, my door opened in a hurry. "Boss," Kravik's voice came in first, before his body stepped inside with something flopping in his hand. The way he looked had told me enough that something big had happened, but he couldn't tell how big it was by himself, feeling unsure. "We got this directly from Silverhaven. One of their runners just came by." "Oh?" That was enough to make me pause and put down my quill. Slowly, I leaned back in my chair, letting my fingers tap once against the desk, before I gestured for him to bring it over, furrowing my brows. He did so without a word, placing the envelope before me, while I just kept looking at it for a moment, trying to decide if this was a coincidence or not. As for the letter, it was real. The seal alone was not something anyone would dare to copy, and there was no reason to dally, so, breaking it, I slowly unfolded the contents, my eyes moving across the text once. Then again, biting my lips. I didn't know if I should be happy about it or not. "Bad news?" Kravik asked, making me look up at him. Well, I leaned back. "Depends." "Auriel?" Kravik asked, noticing the shift in my expression, making me shrug. "They're hosting an auction." "That's not unusual, is it?" "No," I agreed, my gaze moving back onto the page. "It isn't." Then I tapped the document lightly against the desk, shaking my head. "But the main piece they are auctioning off is. It will be a once-in-a-lifetime auction, that's for sure." That made him frown slightly. They wouldn't say it unless they meant it. "Is it an artifact?" he asked, his nose sharp enough to catch it, making me nod at him. "So, what is it?" Kravik asked, getting a foreboding feeling rise within him. An elven artifact, I said simply, seeing his one eye enlarge. Yeah, the same one, my friend. Turns out that the city lord won't hold on to it, and he decided to cash it in. Are we going? He asked, his tone getting deeper slightly as he took in a deep inhale. According to this? I waved the letter, which was also the invitation and pass to get in. Yes. We shouldn't, he said at once, stomping his feet. That shit is nothing but an apocalyptic curse waiting to consume more human souls. We should stay as far from it as possible. True, I agreed, because I also held the belief that winning that thing, the consequences of doing so, would be catastrophic. But I am not going to refuse this invitation. That would be just as bad as attending and trying to buy that accursed item. Auriel. Relax, I laughed, raising both of my hands. I'm not buying shit. Well, scratch that, but I won't buy the artifact. I had let it go. How many times now? A lot. So I don't need it, don't want it, and I don't care for it. But the auction has to have some other good stuff put on display, so we should still go and take a look. He stuttered, then looked away, rubbing the back of his head. I see. Sorry. I didn't mean to shout. No worries, I smiled and watched how Kravik fell silent after that, letting his mood slowly settle back to normal. I could understand his feelings, but I wasn't lying. Fuck that artifact. I was more curious about what else we may pick up, so I leaned back again, letting the letter rest lightly on the table while I was playing with my quill between my fingers as my thoughts moved ahead of the present moment. Can you bring guests? Kravik asked after being silent for a long time. Yes. I flinched, getting back to my senses. Only 2 people, so it will be you and Lyra, as you both know everything. How much money will we bring? Bring? That made me chuckle, shaking my head. None. Huh? He blinked, a bit confused. Aren't we buying stuff? The prices of things will be off the charts, and nobody is carrying that amount of gold on their person. I bet you anything that most deals will be finalized after the event, and with how Silverhaven is, nobody will try to shirk away from paying up. Oh, he nodded, crossing his arms. That does make sense. I never went to such a fancy event, so I'm not that familiar with how it's supposed to go. I'm curious too, I chuckled, looking at him, because I haven't been to one either. I didn't expect Valcroft to sell it. I won't lie, me neither. I stood up, looking out the window, watching the city, but I have to give credit where it's due. He is a city lord, so he knows what moves to make. I'm just curious if Silverhaven will announce who the seller is or not, because if not, I smiled, glancing back at him, that will be a very expensive piece of information to sell. The city changed within 1 or 2 days, and if not for the fact that I was paying attention to it, I would have missed it all. I noticed that more carriages than usual entered the city, with an increased number of guards accompanying them. I had already guessed that Silverhaven's invitations weren't limited to the city, and the appearance of unique, expensive foreign items in markets that didn't typically deal in such things confirmed to me that some of the other players were already in the city. It became undeniable when actual foreigners began arriving, looking different, be it their skin color or the language they spoke. It was my first time hearing another tongue, and surprisingly, a faint thought flashed through my mind. It was just like when I first woke up in this world. A memory from the dead Auriel, telling me that every species had their common tongue, so did we. But that didn't mean every place in this world spoke the same one, all the time. There were dozens of dialect versions, so different that they qualified as a different language. While I was constantly telling my people to log everyone entering the city, I also began categorizing them, drawing their faces, getting to know their ranks, which nobles they were, from where, and if coming from nearby, which neighboring city-state they had come from, or check which merchants they associated with, from where, and the one who was giving me all that was none other than Fatty Merrick. He was let back in through Marcus, and I kept milking Merrick for all the information about the newcomers, since Merrick had his own invitation as well. As for the snake, I would personally pick it up after the auction, and when he heard that, he immediately returned to the Swan the next day, making sure that he would be seen in there, playing all the high-stakes tables that were available. As for the city lord, Valcroft personally oversaw the reception of the most prominent arrivals, following customs. It was mostly for the other city lords within the region who had come as well, showing that Silverhaven's reach was bigger than I expected. Or it was because of the artifact. Probably both, if I had to make a bet on it. But they weren't the ones that interested me the most, because they would follow certain rules, as they had a reputation to uphold. What could be dangerous were well, individuals. Those figures who came without belonging to anything or anyone, at least not openly. The ones who walked through the gates looking like no one. Luckily, I was aware of their presence, thanks to being reached out to from within the Adventurers Guild. Joran was kind enough to send word, and mostly warnings, to keep an eye on some people who were less than savory, especially with their backgrounds within the guild. "Boss," Rayan said one evening, leaning in slightly as he stood beside me on the bottom floor of the Swan, watching the crowd, "we've got another group coming into the city today that has been marked as dangerous." "I am no longer surprised," I said simply, raising the drink in my hand to my mouth. The four of them were looking like regular travelers, but I checked in with Joran. One of them is a gold ranker. His name is Warturg, and he has held his rank for 20 years now. He isn't someone to be fucked with. "Short fuse?" I asked, squinting a little, hearing his words. "No, but a very vindictive man. Apparently he keeps a book of all the names who crossed him once, ready to take his revenge when the opportunity arises." "Is he a dwarf?" I blurted it out, making Rian reel back in shock. "No, oh God, no, I don't think so. He hasn't got a beard, and he is pretty tall." "Ah, okay." I chuckled, holding back a laugh, forgetting that dwarfs were a thing. "Well, keep track of every face, and make sure our people keep themselves in line. The city just became a death trap. Let's not spring any." Besides that, for the Swan, it was perfect. It was more than perfect. It was an opportunity that wouldn't come again, I think, not for a long while. We not only kept raising the stakes, allowing bigger and bigger bets, but also began converting their assets into gold. It was incredible, seeing all the foreigners finding out about our place, coming in to take a look, and then start betting like they were always addicted to it. We went into overdrive, and I even opened the second floor and all the private rooms, announcing that for now, they will serve the same way as the bottom floor, setting each room with a hard limit, forcing the people there to limit their bets and play on an actual timer, so everyone had a chance to play. It also made them afraid of missing out, so the amount they kept putting on the table was mouth-watering. Also, I don't think I had shaken so many hands before, as every visitor learning about the Swan wanted to meet with me, have a drink, or just have a short chat, making me learn about 100 names just on the first day. I couldn't say no, because all of them were a potential ally, or could even be a potential threat. No matter which, I made sure to meet as many of them as I could. You never know, and, if nothing else, I would start building up my own little database for the future. And get rich in the process, probably rich enough to actually buy something when the day of the auction arrives. Chapter 107, Auction 1. The building where the auction would take place was not Silverhaven's main building. When we arrived at the address and I took a look, it wasn't the tallest or the widest building in the city, but it did look the part. The outside was covered in smooth white stone, polished to such a degree that the setting sun and the early evening light of the moon made it shimmer in an ethereal way. Getting out of the carriage, I looked at the tall arched windows lining its sides and the golden letters above the massive four-door entryway, spelling one simple name: Auction House. They weren't really creative, huh? Or they just liked simplicity, I couldn't really tell. If I had to compare it to something, it reminded me of something that was similar to an opera house from the 1800s, mixed with some Roman-style temple or something. As for the banners hanging from some of the upper balconies, they were completely silver in color, no other adoration on them, but it was enough to know it represented Silverhaven. Behind me, Kravik stepped down next, already scanning the surroundings with hawk-like eyes. While Lyra followed last, fidgeting with the hem of her dress slightly as she walked next to me. When I turned toward her, I couldn't help but pause for half a second longer than necessary. I just found her nervousness way too cute, because she was unused to being dressed so, well, and openly as her dress left her back open, while in the front, her bosom was drawing eyes to it, including mine. She looked gorgeous. I have to say, I picked well, watching how the dress fit her form perfectly, colored in a deep blue with subtle silver threading that caught the light when she moved, making her sparkle. Her hair was now slightly wavy, cascading down behind her, and naturally she noticed me staring. "What?" she asked, a faint smile tugging at her lips, going pink, trying to sound confident instead of embarrassed. Deep down, she liked the feeling. She enjoyed that I had my eyes stuck on her because she told me so herself. "Nothing," I said, offering her my arm. Just thinking that I chose correctly. "In what way?" she asked, taking my arm as we began walking towards the marble steps. "To be with you," I replied immediately, "and the clothes too." She giggled happily, hugging me even tighter, while Kravik leaned in just slightly from my other side. "Security's tight," he muttered, watching the other people present, standing on the steps at the doors, and guests getting out of their own carriages. Not just guards. I can sense eyes watching us from everywhere. "I would be disappointed if there weren't," I answered under my breath, because people were arriving constantly. It wasn't just us. And everyone at this level would have their own informants and guards. When we reached the doors, at the top of the steps, 2 attendants stood waiting for us. "Welcome," one of them said, bowing just enough to show respect without lowering himself, clearly a Silverhaven employee. "Invitation, please." I handed over the letter without a word because I was sure even the city lord would have to do the same, no matter how well known he was. He didn't even need to open it fully. His eyes flicked across the seal, ran his finger along the texture of the paper, the insignia pressed into the corner. Then he stepped aside immediately. "Everything is in order. Please follow me, honored guests." We were led inside without a word, and the interior made the exterior feel modest. Warm golden light came down on us from above, from chandeliers that looked more like constellations, their pristine glass-made bodies twinkling brightly. The floor beneath our feet was polished dark stone, reflecting us, but luckily not enough to allow anyone to look up the arriving guests' skirts. Or was it just my thought to check? Drawing my attention away from that before Lyra could notice, I heard voices echoing, but it was in a language I didn't understand. There were small, curated gatherings of individuals, probably nobles, merchants, strangers, wearing foreign attire, some that reminded me of togas or yukatas, while others were wearing clothes that were more like those of some European military officers' attire. I don't know how far Silverhaven could reach with its invitations, but damn. I heard at least 5 different languages within the first few seconds. "Keep your head forward," I murmured quietly to Lyra. "Don't stare too much. Who knows what that means in some of the other cultures' languages?" "I'm not," she whispered back. "I don't even want to talk to them." "Yeah, me neither," I chortled, "but one day we must. So, we will need to learn some languages, if we want to spread our wings in the future." "That?" she shrugged. "May be true." I chuckled softly under my breath, patting her hand while we were guided past the main hall and toward a wide, curved staircase. The attendant did not speak while we walked, and his pace never changed since he began leading us, as if he knew exactly how long it should take for us to take everything in, yet keep it hurried enough to not let us stop. At the top of the stairs, the space opened into something that looked like an amphitheater or, yes, an opera house. There were rows of private booths, elevated above the ground floor, clearly grouped in tiers along the circular walls, each separated by carved dividers and draped with thick curtains that allowed for privacy without fully isolating the occupants. As we walked along, I took a look over the railing, and below us, at the center, was the half-circle-shaped stage, an elevated platform where the auction would take place, as far as I guessed. From where we were, every booth had a perfect view, and I would guess that we counted as VIPs to get our own. "Now this," I murmured, "that's how you handle things." "It's beautiful." Lyra squeezed my arm lightly when hearing me whisper. "It is, and I am curious who will host the auction." I nodded. "You see, beauty is just the tool they are using, so don't let yourself be dazzled." "I am not," she pouted, pinching my hand, making me giggle while our attendant led us along the curved walkway until we reached one of the booths. Our booth. He pulled aside the curtain and gestured inside. Please enjoy yourselves. He said to us, there is a tiny bell hanging on the right. Just ring it, and one of ours will come and attend to your needs. Thank you, I said as I stepped inside. It was larger than I expected, with comfortable plush seating, a low table already set with drinks, and a clear line of sight to the stage below. Soft lighting illuminated the interior just enough to see, while keeping us hidden from others unless they made an effort. Kravik, acting like a guard, moved immediately, checking corners, sightlines, and the entrance behind us, the moment our attendant was gone. Clean, he muttered. They won't try anything. I chortled as I took a seat, leaning back slightly, picking up and tasting the drinks. We will only need to watch our backs after we leave this auction. This is going to be interesting. Please don't jinx it. Lyra settled beside me, her hand resting lightly against mine. Ha! They really separate everyone. Hopefully it will also keep us safe. Of course they do, I nodded. Nobody wants their face read while they're losing fortunes. But the smart ones can recognize voices anyway. So my guess would be those who want to stay hidden would use decoys to announce their bids. Before she could reply, movement stirred at the side of our booth, and just as I said, voices will give people away, like when a familiar laugh followed the stirring. I wasn't surprised at all when the curtain next to ours moved, and a moment later, Merrick Dovas's fat head leaned halfway into our space as if he belonged here. Probably heard us to be so brave and risk a decapitation. Well, well, he boomed, his voice loud enough to be heard by anyone around us. Was he already drunk? If it isn't my dear friends. Or just stupid. Or he was doing this intentionally, the bastard. Careful. I didn't even turn fully toward him when I said it. People might hear you and follow you back to your caravan to rob you. He laughed loudly at that, closing the curtain, and then I heard his waddling steps as he came over from his booth to ours. He was dressed better this time, even better than he was when coming to my swan. He wore green and gold again, freshly tailored and fitted to his body, with frilly accessories, high boots, and even a cape and a cane. What a pompadour. You wound my feelings, my dear Auriel, he said, placing a hand over his chest. After everything we've been through together? We've been through very little, I replied, smiling but not, and most of it was unpleasant, even if we are back to square one. Kravik snorted while listening to me, and I saw how Lyra hid a smile behind her cup. Merrick, however, didn't take offense, and he couldn't. Not after all that happened. He leaned against the divider between our booths like we were sharing a drink in some back-alley tavern, acting like he was my new best friend. I see I also misjudged your connections, he began again, his eyes flicking over the booth, then to us. Your booth is more elaborate than mine. Not that I'm angry about that. Good, good. This is not a place for amateurs. You are deep, my friend, and it was my fault for almost drowning. But don't worry, I'm a good swimmer. I assume you float, I said without thinking. Ah ha 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 ha. He laughed, slapping his belly, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You know, he continued, if you see something you like, something a bit out of reach, I would be more than happy to assist. Yeah! There it was. He is trying again. I turned my head fully toward him now, meeting his gaze. No, I said simply. Now, he chuckled, trying to keep up his smile. No need to be so quick to refuse. I have influence amongst many of the other customers, connections. I said no. My tone didn't rise, and for a brief moment something flickered behind his eyes, but I kept looking into it. Then it was gone, replaced with that same greasy charm. I made sure he knew that even if we were restarting our talks, I was still cold to his antics. Of course, he laughed, raising both hands slightly. I only offer because I care. Don't, I replied. First, we will need to work together without issues for a while. For me to start warming up. Well, he said brightly, as if nothing had happened. We can do that, and you will see, there is no harm done in a bit of disagreement. We are all here to enjoy ourselves, yes? We will talk later then, I assume, when you come and collect that gift of yours? Maybe, I murmured, and he grinned at that. Oh, I can't wait, he said, and then he stepped back, retreating into his own booth. But remember, he added, just before the curtain fell back into place, if you change your mind, I am right next door. I won't. We'll see. And just like that, he was gone, and Lyra leaned slightly closer to me. He really doesn't give up. No, I said, watching the stage below as movement began to gather, and that's exactly why he's useful, but I will handle him like one would handle a venomous snake. The same one we will get from him. He's annoying. Kravik folded his arms, grunting, that too. And just then the lights dimmed slightly as all the voices that filled the hall ceased at once, and an enchanting figure stepped onto the stage, dressed in black and silver, being nobody else but Celine. Chapter 108, Auction 2. Celine stood at the center of the stage for a moment, looking around at everyone, scanning the booths on the upper levels, including ours, allowing the quiet to last just long enough to make her next words feel even more authoritative. My dear esteemed guests, she began again, her voice smooth as silk, and no matter what she said, everyone could hear her clearly. I was curious how she was doing it, but it didn't matter much. Welcome to Silverhaven's 101st auction. As she said that, there was no applause to interrupt her, and it made me raise a brow, unsure whether that number was high or not. We gather tonight, she continued in the meanwhile, sweeping the crowd with her eyes, to present to you something that you will find nowhere else. Every item you will see tonight, she added, knowing most of the people here was looking forward to get a bid on the elven artifact, has been selected by me personally to accompany the theme of our main attraction. With that, she took a step forward, putting her hands together before her, the smile on her face both attractive and somewhat, dangerous. And as always, she added, her tone sharpening just slightly, Silverhaven guarantees the authenticity of every piece presented before you. Please do follow our customs and understand that your bids are contractual. What you offer and what we accept will be expected to be upheld. We will enforce the transaction, so bid with that in mind. She has a certain air around her, Lyra muttered, watching her. It's scary, but also, I don't know, she is not someone to cross, Kravik snorted, saying it very simply. I had heard about people like her, and although I never met anyone at her level, I can tell you that much, boss. He leaned closer to my ear. People like her would easily make any gold-ranking idiot run for their money. I'm not here to flip the table over anybody, I whispered back, shrugging. No need to warn me about her at all, or about her little helper. I pointed with my chin as now a second figure was on the stage, Selene's little shadow, Lucialu. Well, she wasn't little because she was tall. And even if she was dressed well, the sharp feline features and her bestial additions, be it the ear, tail, or the claws on her hand, betrayed her dangerous nature. At least she was more human-like than the ones Kravik and I faced when we went to deal with them, finding that damned artifact. It was then that Lyra shifted beside me, pursing her lips. She's, I don't like her. Well, she is dangerous, I finished quietly, patting her hand. I am not surprised you feel like that. They can be dangerous, and I guess, being under Celine, she is much more trained than any of her regular kind. Yeah, Kravik agreed. I don't think, even on proper potions, we could deal with her effectively. Maybe we should get our own beastman. He asked as a half-joke, but maybe. I just didn't know how to go about it, because owning slaves was not something I was keen on. They could turn against us, and I wasn't having that. I would prefer loyalty over servitude. Watching Lucialu arrive next to Celine, it turned out she had carried the first item forward, placing it at the center pedestal before stepping back, remaining just behind Celine's shoulder, acting as a silent assistant. The first offering of the evening, Celine said, not even looking at her, trusting that everything was in order, she kept speaking, is a relic, from a time many of you have only heard of. What we know comes from old fragments and many assumptions. But I know many of you, the well-read nobles and learned individuals, are able to recognize it. Those who need a bit of pointers, she chuckled, while Lucialu removed the covering cloth in one smooth motion. I will explain its origins. As for what it was, it looked like a metal plate. Armor? A piece of it? I couldn't tell, but it had to be something between a ceremonial piece and a functional thing. One thing I was sure of, though, was that it had to be super old because it was worn out. Not exactly damaged per se, but time did a number on it. Still, its surface was clean and etched with patterns I didn't recognize, but made me think of magic runes. Was this another elf thing, or— "This is a very old command insignia," Celine continued, "from the era known simply as, all of you may have already guessed, the Empire." "The what?" I muttered to myself, looking at Lyra, who had no idea either. "What is it?" she whispered, now both of us looking at Kravik. "Don't ask me," he shrugged. "I don't know." "For those unfamiliar," Selina said calmly, as if answering our questions, "the Empire refers to the period in which humanity stood unified under a single banner. The first and last time in our long history," she added with a giggle, "nearly 1,000 years ago." "Huh." I leaned back, listening curiously. Now that things are smoothing out, I should look up the world's history. There is a lot to catch up on anyway. "As you all know, it only lasted for 2 generations," Celine added in the meantime, speaking about it casually. "Before it fractured, of course. We are humans after all." As she said it, some people chuckled, but I didn't find it funny. It was more sad, really. No matter what world, we just can't get things to work without fucking it up, eh? Ha. Whatever. Relics from that era are, as you all know, exceptionally rare, she added, smiling, probably saying it to raise the initial price of the fancy little trinket. Most were lost, destroyed, or repurposed in the wars that followed the fracture, or simply because of the need for resources over the centuries. Luckily, this one was not and survived until today. "Well, let's get this auction started, shall we?" "Opening bid," she said with a pause. "It is 20,000. For that, I almost asked, but just then someone shouted, 30, 50. I leaned back, shaking my head while watching the pace. Ugh, it was fast and stupid. I get collectors, but I also don't. Who would pay that much for that? I wouldn't. "Why are they bidding so high?" Lyra asked quietly, also bewildered. "Because they don't understand it," I replied, "or just think it's some— whatever. I don't know, it's stupid." "True to that, boss," Kravik snorted too. "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense from a collector's standpoint," I tried to explain, shaking my head. "Unknown things are either worthless or priceless. And nobody here wants to guess wrong, and they think that if Celine sells it, it isn't worthless. Probably has a secret background, giving someone, somewhere, legitimacy over the old empire or whatever other silly nonsense. Good luck cashing that in, though. That's why it's stupid. It only has worth as a sentimental piece, really." While I was speaking, the bidding climbed steadily. Soon it was 70, then 90. It stopped there for about 5 good seconds before someone put down 100,000, and it went to the last voice. "Next," Celine said at once, not even stopping, as Lucy Lau brought in the item, this time carrying a case. It was new, brand new. When it was opened, the light caught the glass within the velveted interior, making me sit up straight because there were, well, several vials in different colors. I couldn't tell what their origin was, but I can recognize a set of potions if I see one. "An assortment, really," Celine said, introducing it just the same. "For those who have an affinity to alchemy will appreciate their power." Her fingers hovered above them, indicating each in turn. "And those who don't, you will still want them, as these potions were brewed by Vinci, the prime alchemist of Leagian City within Camoria." "Did she say Vinci, as in Da Vinci?" "Who's that?" Kravik asked, a bit confused. "And she said Vinci, not Vinci." "That's what I said," I repeated, but it was getting confusing, so I just waved my hand. "Doesn't matter." "Do you know him?" Lyra asked, curious, but I just shook my head. It would be too much to explain it now. Plus, I already missed the introduction of the first set of vials, so I was listening to what the others did. "A regenerative compound capable of restoring severe physical trauma within minutes, as long as the limb wasn't severed completely," Celine was saying, pointing at them one by one. "An essence amplifier, which is capable of increasing magical output at the cost of physical strain. It is best if you feed it to a beast, as on us, it has very little to no effect." She chuckled, but that alone made it feel so nefarious. "And," she paused for a moment, "lastly, a stabilizing agent, capable of neutralizing most known toxins." I was thinking about bidding for it to get it for Lyra and let her study them, but I don't know if she could or how to begin. Plus, the bidding started higher this time, and there was no hesitation in what they wanted. 200,000, 3, skipping 4 and 5 altogether, and it didn't stop there. In the end, I just grimaced, and I didn't even bid. I don't know who this Vinci fella is, but I would not pay this much for his paintings either, if he had any. In the end, the box was sold for 760,000. Outrageous. But I couldn't grumble about it for too long, because the third item made my jaw drop wide. It was also an old-looking box, pretty big, and when it was opened, I could recognize the preserved but ancient alchemical set. There was everything one needed. Pots, vials, burners, mortars, alembics, and retorts. The whole range of must-have items in one box set. This, Celine said with the same smile, is a complete alchemical set that was crafted and used by actual Murians. Auriel. Lyra looked at me at once because we already had the book, so I knew that name at least. I was already leaning forward, my eyes locked onto the set, and I noticed that despite its age, it looked pristine. If it was used, it was barely done so, or it was taken care of reverently. Maybe it was a showcase piece. Can they be used? Murian craftsmanship is older than the Empire, Celine continued, wanting me to curse, because of course she would try to drive up its price. But this set only works in those hands that can brew a potion. If you aren't a proper alchemist, they won't do you good. Even then, if you're an amateur, your creations will be the same as if you used your grandmother's pots to make them. Many of the people chuckled at that, but I did not. Lyra needs a proper set, so... It was time to finally start bidding. The starter began at 100,000, of course it did, so I threw out 200, making the place choke a little on it. Auriel, Lyra whispered, but I just smiled at her. What? I grinned. We have the money. We saved up a lot. Why have it if we are afraid of spending it? 300, I yelled when someone bid 20,000. Time to tighten the rope and continue choking them. Some continued to raise the price, but I wasn't having it. I don't know if it was my luck or the aggressive way I did it, but it stopped when I yelled 500,000, and it was sold to us because nobody else wanted to battle. Easy, I grinned, reaching out, patting Lyra's hand, who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Don't worry, my dear. You will make good use of it, I whispered, planting a kiss on her face. I know you will. I better be, she moaned, as red as a tomato. Ha! Chapter 1, 109. Auction 3. By the time the final stretch of the auction approached, I had already stopped trying to keep track of the numbers they were throwing out. I thought I was a hard spender for the alchemy set, but no. Soon, splashing a mill on stuff that I thought was pretty much worthless was the norm. At some point, somewhere between the 9th or 10th absurd-looking trinket, supposedly a something of a god's tear or whatever, gold had lost meaning. So someone offered up property, and not just a house, but actually land, enough to build multiple homes on it. Letting it play out, I just leaned back slightly in my seat, one arm resting along the side of the plush chair, holding my drink in the other, smiling like a dumb kid first visiting the big city. These people, Kravik leaned in, whispering, have gone mad. If they have this much money, we should rob them. We should for sure tweak the slot machines, I agreed. Turns out we are too generous. They have the cash to lose. You know what? Lyra also muttered, looking at us. I won't even say it's immoral. Do it. I just laughed, while a flame sealed in glass that refused to extinguish, or so they said, got sold, followed by a beast core that was apparently a supreme alchemy ingredient. It came from a creature that a band of 12 gold rankers brought down and sold for 2 million and a deed for a sailing ship. Fuck's wrong with these people? Each one went for sums that would have bought parts of Velgrada twice over. And nobody even blinked. Okay, that may be a bit too much, as a city like this probably would be in the hundreds of millions, but I wouldn't be shocked if I hear Valcroft suddenly throw the city in, because he had gone mad. The aura inside the auction house was certainly making everyone act irrationally, bidding like madmen. I was starting to get why Silverhaven was so feared. They had the money and weight to throw around. I will have to hold my own auction at some point. This is insane, Lyra whispered again, her fingers moving slightly into my sleeve to hold me. Never go to such a place without me, okay? I don't want you to throw away our future. I hummed, not disagreeing. I wouldn't. I leaned over, kissing her face. Then, just as I did that, without announcement, the atmosphere suddenly shifted, and I noticed it at once. Raising my eyebrow, I watched as Selene straightened, and I think her aura alone diffused the growing bidding frenzy, calming everyone down. I wondered how strong she was. There had to be more to her than just influence. Moving fluidly, she stepped into the center of the stage, her gaze sweeping every booth, one by one. For a moment, I was sure she could see us, no matter what. "My dear esteemed guests," she began, her voice sounding more enchanting than ever, probably preparing us for the finale. "So it was time, huh? We have arrived at what everyone was waiting," she continued, "to the final item of tonight's selection." With a small gesture of her hand, Lucilau had appeared again, with a velvet cushion, and there it was. That damned artifact. I recognized it at first sight. "Tsk," Kravik snorted, subconsciously tapping his missing eye. "That bone-made fuckery. I hope whoever buys it brings it as far away from us as possible. Since we touched it, there has been misfortune after misfortune. I don't want to see it, ever again, even if it gives you endless riches." "I agree," I said quietly. "I almost died to it multiple times, or around it, to be precise. Well, the original Auriel did die to it, but that was unimportant by now." While I was thinking about that, Selene took it into her hand and held it up so everyone could see it. Then, click. It opened, making me raise my brows and lean forward as I watched closely. Even from here, I could tell something was wrong about it. What was that? A moon dial? A star chart? Huh? Looking inside, the medallion had opened to reveal something far more complex than just a clock. What was that translucent crystal disc at its center, surrounded by rotating rings etched with, runes? It had to be some kind of clock, with thin, needle-like hands that moved across its surface. Was this a pocket watch? Because if it was, it had to be counting down for the next calamity or something. "Don't stare too much," I muttered under my breath, nudging Lyra, who looked lost in it. "Ah. Yes." She shifted beside me, blinking her eyes, and immediately began leaning back. "I don't like it." "Exactly," I replied. "We shouldn't." By then, Selene closed it again, with a soft snap, and didn't let the silence stretch for too long as she began speaking. "This artifact is known as a seer's calculus, made and used by the elven race, as you all had guessed so far. The name meant nothing to most people here because there were no oohs and ahs or anything like that. But there were some hisses when the elves were mentioned. It originates from the High Elven Magistracy," she continued calmly. "This item is a sign of great importance, so it had to be a High Seer's own creation, someone whose name we may not know. But I would bet my Silverhaven the elves do. Still, don't mistake its importance as power, because this was not used as a weapon, but as an instrument of calculation, as the name implies." I narrowed my eyes slightly. "So, is that a calculator watch? But fantasy design? Or more like a smartwatch? Because if I look at it like that, it's not that big of a deal." "It does not predict a single future," she went on. "Instead, it models possibilities, their outcomes, and mostly their probabilities. So it was a horoscope watch for elves. Even less impressive if it is so. When used by an elven seer, it allows its wielder to evaluate their decisions. While we usually surround ourselves with advisors, their leaders turn to their innate magic to predict the result of their choices. War? Would they win or lose? Trade? When to sell or buy? Governance? When to isolate and open up? All of those questions were consulted with this artifact. Tsik. She knew how to sell shit. Even I was almost curious to ask those damned questions before realizing, as a human, I had no magic in me. Not that I would believe it. I hate the fact of a determined future. That's so depressing. Whatever comes will come, and that's it. I don't need to know it and worry about it, because that just pulls the worst out of everyone. Let me be clear. Selene continued while I was thinking, this is not a tool that can be used by humans. Without elven magic, she warned us all, its full functionality remains inaccessible. With another stretching silence, she suddenly smiled, putting it back down, and after Lucilao placed it on a small pedestal, Selene clapped, calling out the opening line for the last bidding war. The artifact will begin at 1 million gold. 2 million. There was no hesitation, and it got drowned out at once. 3. 5. I blinked once, and it was already there. Wait. 8. 10. 15. What the actual fuck? 20. 25. 30. Okay, you guys aimed at the moon and went to the next star system. Are you mad? I stopped trying to follow. Fuck you. Really, fuck you all. I offer 2 merchant fleets and exclusive trade rights across the southern coast. I offer a fortified castle and its surrounding land in the Vulcar Heights. I offer my family's mining operations in the western ranges of Opatri. I offer command over 10,000 soldiers from the Raz Republic. I offer a ducal title recognized by a Gold Reign imperial decree. Okay, this was no longer madness nor laughable idiocy, this was simply nonsense someone had made up. And I was sitting in it, watching. Come on, you can't even use it, and you want to sell a whole family mining business. Offer nobility with a whole fleet and land. What the fuck? Maybe I should have sold it. Wait, what would Valcroft do if it sells for a noble title? Damn. I think I would die of laughter. What the fuck could he do with that? Ah ha ha ha. Please, do sell it for something useless like that. But it also made me realize that we were still small, way too small compared to the world. And you know what? I'm fine with spending my money on an alchemy set in my little corner of the world. I can't and won't bother myself with things I can't comprehend yet. That was when I heard a charming bell-like voice call out, for the first time since the auction had started. I offer a wish. There was silence at first, followed by loud laughter. I was also surprised by it, but I kept looking at Selene, who turned towards the booth opposite us, waiting for the roaring laughter to die down. A wish? What is this, a child's story? Ridiculous. Who are you? What wish could you grant that our offers can't match? I leaned forward, wanting to see who the offer was coming from, but they remained in the shadows. State your claim, Selene said calmly, suddenly silencing everyone who was laughing. She was serious. I offer one fulfilled request. It has to be reasonable, can't clash with our interest, can't endanger us, and it has to be within my power. What? Now there were even more murmurs, utterly dismissive and openly mocking. I could see why they were filled with skepticism and doubt about what it might even mean. Were they this blind or jealous? Couldn't they see that Selene was thinking about it? I could, probably because I wasn't blinded by greed. That, she said slowly in the end, is a considerable offer. Finally, that shut them up, but only for a moment. You can't be serious. A wish has no value without proof. Selene's gaze moved away from the feminine voice's booth, a bit to the left, close to ours. Wait, was that the fatty's voice? Tisk. You are in trouble. Oh, Selene said softly, beginning to grin. I disagree, because the one making the offer. She paused, and I could swear her eyes flashed, savoring the excitement in the hall, is Elven. My gaze snapped back at the shrouded booth at once. Damn, that I did not expect. What? Someone else yelled out finally, but Selene waved a hand, speaking over the erupting clamor. You think my Silverhaven's auctions are for humans only? She asked with a clear contempt and rising authority. Have you all forgotten who I am? If you want to offend the guests I invited, you will offend me personally. Do it at your own risk, please, but calculate the risks coming with it. Now. She chuckled, scanning everyone in the room. Let the offers come. The one who is selling this item will choose the one they fancy the most. Boss? Kravik muttered, barely finding his voice. Elves? Holy shit. Elves? What? I snorted, poking his side. Want to see them? Pfft. I never saw one, he grunted, pouting like a kid. I got excited for a moment. Boys, Lyra mumbled, and I could tell she felt jealous for some reason, so I just held her hand, squeezing it. Well, I bet you could masquerade as one. Ha, idiot, she blushed, giggling. I'm just sorry about one thing. That is, they asked, looking at me, that Valcroft gets to choose what he takes in exchange. I hoped he gets to sell it for something he can't cash in. Chapter 1. 110. A wish? The end of the auction didn't come with a bang of a hammer or anything like that, which was not how I imagined it would happen. It was simpler. The offers slowly died down as everyone stated what they were willing to pay for the item, sometimes raising their previous bid, trying to make it even more enticing with ranks and benefits, unaware that the one they were offering it to already had all of that. I guess even presenting a city wouldn't work in this case, which made me chuckle. When it all came to a stop, though, everyone knew it was time to end it. The seer's calculus, Celine finally said, her voice smooth as she smiled, looking around the private booths, will be transferred under the agreed terms. With that, she turned towards the elves, speaking in a language that I had never heard before. It sounded like a sing-song, surprisingly rhythmic and full of vowels. It was easy to tell that the elves would get back their artifact, sweeping the rest of the booths with resignation that quickly began mixing with anger. However, inside here, nobody would dare to challenge the decision. As for outside, I was curious to see how the elves would handle it, but it is best not to put my nose where it doesn't belong. No longer bothering with it, though, I exhaled slowly, leaning back into my seat, emptying the remainder of my drink. Well, I muttered after moistening my lips, that settles that. You know what? Kravik grunted behind me. Good riddance. Lyra nodded softly, still holding onto my free arm. I don't like that thing, so it is best if it doesn't stay near us anyway. I totally agree with you, I said simply, but I am also curious what wish Valcroft has for them. I don't like the idea of that, but we will have to try and discover it, however impossible that sounds. The rest of the auction wrapped up quickly after the artifact was sold. A few more items were pushed through, almost as an afterthought compared to what had just happened, and while they still sold for absurd amounts, nobody really cared anymore. The main event was over, and everything else was just clean up. A clearance sale, if you will. Shall we go? I asked, stretching slightly as I stood. Please, Lyra said immediately, my feet hurt in this shoe. Kravik didn't even answer. He was already moving toward the curtain, but before we could leave, the fabric was pulled away from the outside. Honored guests, a voice interrupted us as a woman stepped into our booth. As the representative of Silverhaven, I request a moment of your time. I exchanged a glance with Kravik, knowing that this was about the item we bought. Looking at her, she was well dressed and composed, carrying herself with the same authority Lucilao showed on the stage, while two guards stood just outside, visible only as silhouettes. First and foremost, "Good evening," she said with a slight bow. "On behalf of Lady Celine, we thank you for your participation." I nodded, not bothering to stand on ceremony. "Is this about the alchemy set we bought?" "Yes," she smiled. "Please follow me. Arrangements have been prepared for the conclusion of your transaction." "Lead the way," I said without thinking, and soon we were escorted through the back corridors of the building. We were led away from the main hall and the noise of the crowd, walking out into the city through the main hall. On the other hand, we were walking downwards, heading underground, and the deeper we went, the quieter it became. The room we were then shown into was small, but no less refined than our booth. A low table had already been set up with food and drinks, in case we needed more. "Please make yourselves comfortable," the representative said, looking at us. "As for the payment for your purchased lot, we will have to finalize it. You can send a representative or ask one of ours to bring or fetch the offered gold. We will provide our own guards to escort them, free of charge, of course." "So we have to pay now?" I smiled, and she simply smiled back. "Naturally. When the payment is received, your item will be delivered shortly, right here or to your chosen spot." "I see," I replied, taking a seat, reaching for a handful of salted peanuts. Then I glanced at Kravik. "Go with them and make sure we pay the exact amount." "Yeah." He nodded and turned, leaving immediately and stepping out with the guards who had been waiting for him. After the representative also left and we were left waiting, Lyra sat beside me, letting out a quiet breath. "That was—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "I don't even know what to call that." "An auction," I said, giggling, reaching down and pulling her leg into my lap, taking her shoes off. "What are you doing?" You said they hurt, I grinned, beginning to massage her feet. Isn't it good? I didn't say that. It's not good. She pouted, blushing. Ha. Good, isn't it? That's one way to put it. Don't worry. After Kravik returns, we are off. I will tell them to bring the set to the Swan. We will have a good use for it, because next I'm going to make the fatty bring the snake, and then we will visit our insane friend. Ooh, I do hope he is not just a quackety quack. A duck? She asked, holding back a laugh. Yeah, anyway, while that happens, I was also thinking that we should expand the Swan. Like? Underground. I added, we can dig down, open up some chambers for future businesses, like your brewing, and a new floor too, where we can live. We have the money now. Do we? She moaned, shivering in pleasure while I kept massaging her feet. We just spent a massive amount. It's a question of different viewpoints, I said, unbothered by the thought of it. Don't worry, we will earn it back quick. You'll see. In the end, Kravik returned with the same guards trailing behind him about half an hour later, a heavy case in his hands, his expression staying neutral, which told me everything I needed to know. When the exchange was complete, the Silverhaven representative stepped forward, accepting the case without a word, checking the amount before us, and then closed it down, smiling like we were buying a new watch or something. Everything is in order. Of course it was, but I kept my mouth shut. We will now proceed with the exchange. What method would you wish us to use? Delivery, I said at once, to the Gilded Swan into my hands. Understood. She nodded, rang a bell, and then another attendant entered, carrying a long, reinforced box that was different from what was shown on stage. They placed it on the table and opened it, and for the first time since I saw it on stage, I got a proper look at it. Please inspect the item, she said, waving a hand towards me to feel free to pick up anything I wanted. Then the container will be closed, and the keys for it will be given to you here and now. You can then confirm its contents upon delivery again. Thank you, I muttered while I was watching it up close with Lyra. I had to say, even for my yes, it was beautiful, and not in a flashy way or in a decorative show-off manner that would make it sit in some kind of noble's china cabinet behind a glass door. More than that, after touching it, I knew at once that this was made to be used. Inside, every piece had its place, fitted perfectly into the dark velvet lining. Running my fingers over them, there was a set of clear, pristine flasks, round-bottomed, narrow-necked, each with subtle etchings along their surface. Runes? No, I think they were labels, I just couldn't read them. Maybe? They were for sure not decorative, scribblings, but guiding marks. Measurements, alignments. Lyra will have to discover that. Beside them, there was a collection of small sealed vials, each with precision-cut stoppers that fit so perfectly I doubted even air could slip through. Honestly, they looked like they were made by modern machinery, not by hand. Then the boxes inside lifted upwards, like a pop-up, revealing some of the heavier tools under it. There was a mortar and pestle, carved from a dark, smooth stone, its surface worn just enough to show it was indeed in use, not just a showcase item. A set of burners followed suit, looking compact, metallic of course, with adjustable vents and a design that suggested a pretty complicated mechanism for providing ample fine adjustments for the alchemist. Lastly, there were the alembics and retorts, the curved glass tubes spiraling and branching inside the box's back walls, snuggled in there. Even though I knew that they were meant for distillation and separation, their craftsmanship was insane. How could someone make these without using machines that I was used to? Everything is present, as you can see, the representative said calmly after I finished my observation, as advertised. I had no doubts, I nodded, thinking what her face would look like if I tried to haggle, but I gulped down my idiotic thoughts. Stop it, brain. Pleasure doing business, I added with a smile. The feeling is mutual. She bowed, and with that, the exchange was done. The box was closed, the locks on it began clicking into place, and I was given a set of 9 keys. Damn, they weren't joking. Opening this after delivery will take 10 minutes. Better safe than sorry, huh? With all of that done, we headed straight back to the Swan. What I was unaware of, well, kind of, because I knew it was happening, I just didn't know how or when, was Valcroft's meeting with the elves. He stood at the head of a long table, hands resting lightly against its polished surface. If one were looking at him, they could see him stand there, relaxed. But it was only a facade, because deep down, he was more nervous than ever before. He had hosted nobles, merchants, rulers of nations, even criminals, and his own enemies. But this? Oh. It was his first time seeing an elf, not to mention being in a room with one. Standing there, he had not taken a seat. He knew he could not stay put at all anyway. That was when the door opened without announcement, and Celine entered first. Looking at her, he saw her step aside and speak in a foreign tongue. And behind her, they appeared. 3 figures, to be exact. And to his surprise, they were smaller than he had expected. They were hooded clothes, which were finally pulled back after the door was closed, and Valcroft's surprise quickly increased because he had never seen more beautiful women before. Wait, were they all women? He needed to take a double and triple take to finally realize that no, only one of them was, because the other 2 were flat. Only the one in the middle had curves. She was perhaps no taller than a child by human standards, barely reaching the height of his navel, but there was nothing small about her at all. Her form was pronounced, and in ways that drew the eye onto them without effort, causing Valcroft to gather all his might to resist the urge to do so. But it was so hard. Her skin shimmered faintly in the lantern light with a natural, deep, warm gold hue. When she revealed her face, her hair flowed straight down her back, long, almost reaching the floor, its color matching her eyes, a molten amber that seemed almost luminous. Even her lashes and brows carried that same hue, but those eyes, they were glowing. It was then that he noticed her ears, and they were unmistakable. They grew long, extending well past 10 centimeters, and instead of going backward, they leaned towards her shoulders. When she moved, they moved too, jiggling just as all the other parts of her, letting the intricate golden threads decorating her ears twinkle and jingle like wind chimes. Now he was sure the other 2 were males, especially after the contrast between them and her. They were taller, but only by a small margin, reaching up to his chest. Also, they were lean and slender, as if built for running around the world. Still, their features were softer than any human woman he had seen, making them look just as delicate, which made him shiver from the thought alone. Gazing at them, their ears were shorter too, also sharper and angled backward instead of sideways. They grew not more than a few centimeters in length than normal, almost human-like, but their pointy end was a dead giveaway. Their skin carried a cooler tone too, one silver, one pale bronze, but their eyes gleamed just as vividly as hers, though in a different color. That glow, it had to be the sign of magic. It was then that Celine stepped between them as the trio approached the table. "City Lord Valcroft," she said smoothly, her voice bridging the 2 parties. "Allow me to present to you the delegation of High Seer Ka'al Aik Val Ne'ir. The woman you see before you is Ka'el Aik Val No'ir, her speaker." Nodding at the trio, the female elf stopped opposite him, her gaze meeting his without hesitation, but there was no return of nods or bow, or any kind of greeting. "They do not speak our tongue, if they can help it," Celine continued, smiling and speaking nonchalantly. "So, I will translate." It was then that the female finally spoke, and the sound that left her lips was clearly not meant for human ears. Valcroft was feeling more than just listening to some music. He began hearing the chirping of birds, smelling the scent of flowers, and seeing the edges of a forest creeping into his vision. But then he closed his eyes, squinting, and it was gone. Damn witch! Even her words were filled with magic, almost affecting him. What was the meaning of this? He almost asked, shouting, but held back his temper. That would have been suicide right now. "She acknowledges the transaction," Celine translated, still smiling, "and also allows your presence to stand before her despite being a male." Valcroft's expression did not change, and he forced himself to speak softly, ignoring the weird parts. "Then let us not waste time. The artifact has been delivered." "No?" Another string of elven speech followed, shorter this time, and Celine's eyes flickered, just briefly, before she spoke again. Yes, and she confirms the terms, she said. One request, City Lord, and as stipulated, within reason and within her powers. Most importantly, it must not be in conflict with her people. You understand, Valcroft said slowly after looking at the elven woman, his voice a bit more steely than he intended, that such an offer is unconventional. I need more details because I don't want to misspeak. Celine translated, and naturally the response came immediately. Valcroft, of course, knew the elves could understand human speech, but their bidding was the only time they were willing to speak it. Now that they had gotten what they came for, they outright refused to communicate through a lesser creature's primitive tongue. Or at least, that was what Valcroft was feeling, looking at them, almost being sure that they were scowling with every look they gave him. Even her tone, even if melodic, could not hide the edge in it. She says, Selena began, that she wants you to ask for it now, and if you don't have a request yet, she will leave a token behind that you can bring to me, and I will be able to contact them through it. No tokens. Valcroft shook his head at once. I have a wish indeed. He said firmly, I want... Then he took a look at Celine, but pulled himself up to his full height, speaking his wish, directly to the small woman before him, watching her shining amber-colored eyes narrow to a slit, her ears twitching, her decorative earrings fluttering and jingling. The men behind him stepped forward, their hands going to the hilts of their curved blades, hidden under their robes. But she raised a hand, stopping them. She just looked into Valcroft's eyes, actually scowling at him, but in the end she nodded, sealing the deal with the utmost disgust on her face. Chapter 1. 111. Snake. The Swan was quiet during the day, making it feel like a completely different place from how it was at night. I woke up not that long ago, close to noon, and was now leaning against the bar with a cup of coffee in hand, suppressing the latest yawn that tried to escape through my mouth. Taking a sip, I stared at the entrance, watching the light shift across the floor as the sun's rays came through the windows, expecting a guest. And it was about time he should arrive. Right on cue, just as I thought about it, the front door opened and a familiar voice yelled towards me like we were old drinking buddies or something. Ah, my dear Auriel. Here we go, I muttered under my breath, watching him walk in, escorted by Kravik and Rian. Merrick waddled in like he owned the place, of course, dressed just as extravagantly as ever, his green and gold outfit somehow even more obnoxious than before, fitting him just barely. Behind him, and flanked by my men, 2 of his own guards struggled to carry in a large cage, wrapped tightly in reinforced cloth and bound with thick leather straps. Merrick, I greeted him flatly, taking a sip again, putting the cup down. You're early. Or I'm late. Well, it depends on how you look at it. I shrugged, shaking my head. Ah ha ha ha, he laughed, waving a hand. Always the same. Joking around while also getting straight to the point. I like that about you. I doubt that, I said it quietly, but he heard it, yet he kept grinning anyway. Now, he answered, stepping closer, lowering his voice slightly. No need to be cold. I brought you something special, didn't I? True. My eyes shifted past him to the bundle, nodding my head. I can see that. You weren't lying, and once again, I may just start appreciating that fact. Would I ever lie to you? He asked, placing a hand over his chest in mock offense. Yes, I answered him, looking into his eyes. Fair, he laughed again, completely unbothered, waving a hand to me to come and take a look. Finally, I pushed myself off the bar and walked over, circling the bundle slowly, expecting the thing inside to move or make a noise, but the snake didn't move much. But it was alive. I could tell that from the infrequent hisses that I heard. Careful with that, I said to his men as they settled it down on a desk. If it breaks out and eats you, I'm not paying for replacements. Naturally, they didn't laugh, but Merrick did, standing with me. Oh, don't worry, he said, waving a hand like it was nothing. This beauty is well contained. Took quite the effort to secure her, I'll have you know. Are you sure about that? Because I don't see her trashing inside and... Her, huh? Interesting. And this, I said, gesturing toward the bundle, how much? Nothing, he said at once. It's my gift, he added quickly. A gesture of goodwill, a sign that I take our Relationship, seriously. Our relationship, I nodded as I repeated his words back to him, looking from the bundle to him. Yes, he nodded enthusiastically. After all, we are partners now, are we not? No. Then, he didn't even blink, rubbing his hands together. Future partners, then, he amended smoothly, without a flinch. Yes, that's better. I exhaled quietly, then waved a hand toward the bundle. Please, open it. I want to see it. Do it. Merrick snapped his fingers, ordering his men, who hesitated for a moment, then began undoing the straps. Layer by layer, the cloth came loose, falling away to reveal a massive, pure white snake. It didn't look pale nor faded, or anything like that. It was white. I mean, damn. It was kind of beautiful. Its scales were like polished bone, smooth and clean, somewhat reflective, almost iridescent, while it was coiled up tightly in on itself. As for its actual size, it had to be massive if stretched out. Even folded in, it was longer than any man in the room, probably twice over, and thick enough that one wrong move could crush a ribcage like dry wood. Tsk. While watching, its head lifted slowly as the last layer fell away, and it looked around curiously with shining red eyes. Well, Merrick said proudly. Magnificent, isn't she? It is, I agreed and also added with a mutter, that's not what I expected. I had a feeling, Merrick beamed at me. Bigger than in the image, yes? A rare specimen, strong, healthy, and dangerous? Kravik's voice cut in from behind me as he stepped closer, hand already resting near his sword. Of course, Merrick said quickly. It could kill a man, but of course you need to be stupid enough to let it coil around you for that. Ahahaha. You see? I told you. A perfect gift. Sure. I looked at him slowly. You did know where to find it from the start, didn't you? He coughed, still smiling. Well, yes. That's why it's here. That's why you sent us away like that, all angry and shouting, wanting to raise the price. I sighed and continued before he could say anything. But that is now water under the bridge. We can start over. Then I looked at him. I'll take your gift. Wonderful. Merrick's face lit up immediately. I knew you would. A man of taste. We will achieve great things together in the future. Don't push it. I wouldn't dream of it, he said, though he absolutely would. That much was clear, especially as he clapped his hands once, stepping back. Well then, my business here is concluded. Already? I asked, actually surprised, because I was expecting him to want to stay and ask for something, or start suggesting future cooperations. Alas, he said dramatically, placing a hand over his heart, duty calls. I have stayed longer than I originally wanted, and although I can explain it to my partners, thanks to Silverhaven's auction, my opportunities won't wait for my arrival much longer. You know how it is. Profits must be chased. Running away? Kravik muttered. Certainly not, Merrick added proudly, finally having an edge to his voice, while I looked at Kravik to not push it. I watched as he reached into his coat and pulled out a small folded parchment, offering it to me. My contacts, he said seriously, routes, names, ways to reach me. Should you ever require assistance. Nodding, I took it and didn't look at it, then handed it to Kravik. We may be able to think of something. I'm more than happy to help out. And, he added, leaning in slightly, lowering his voice, should your alchemical pursuits require further ingredients, rare ones, dangerous ones? Smart. I even smiled a little, nodding, making his eyes flash with satisfaction. I'll keep it in mind, I said. Wonderful. He beamed at me. Excellent. Then we part as friends. We part, I repeated, and watched as he winced. Future friends. Goodbye, Merrick, I said simply, and he didn't stay for long after that. Same to you, he said quickly, backing away. Take care of her. She's worth more than she looks. She's massive, I said again, after Merrick had left and we were left alone there, the girls joining us finally, all of us looking at the snake. But somehow I wasn't convinced. There was something off, and I turned my head slightly, trying to figure out what. I don't think Merrick would have dared to pull a prank on us now, especially because we weren't paying a dime for this snake, but, Ilya. Yes? She asked, watching the animal with curiosity, and then I realized her rat was hiding in her skirt, clearly trying to bite her clothes and pull her away from the snake. That pet of yours is terrified, I noted, watching it struggle. Yeah, she said simply, her eyes locked on the snake. Good instinct, but I keep telling the poor boy to stay calm. It won't hurt it. Careful, Kravik warned her. Snakes this big could easily eat that rat and then get an appetite for seconds. I am careful, she replied without looking at him, shooing him away with a wave of her hand. Animals are my specialty. When she stepped closer, so close in fact she was right up to it with her face, the snake's head tilted and raised up, gazing at her. Huh, Ilya murmured, moving her head, watching as the snake followed along, sticking its forked tongue out at her. Then she crouched even closer, extending a hand, leaving it hovering close by, waiting for its reaction. After a brief moment, the snake moved, leaning forward, and as best as it could from its cage, it nudged against Ilya's hand. What? I blinked, watching it happen, seeing how a snake was displaying the kind of face and emotions I had only seen on puppies and cute pets. The hell? Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Ilya chuckled suddenly, opening it up and beginning to pet the snake that simply let her do it, closing its red eyes with great satisfaction. What? I asked again. She's not aggressive at all, Ilya said, glancing back at us. She's social. Social? Kravik repeated. And I'm a flying pig? Yeah, she said, turning back to the snake. You are. Ha. Just watch. She made a small motion with her fingers, and then the snake followed it. She repeated it so many times that it was no longer a question whether it was or wasn't a coincidence. It clearly understood what Ilya wanted it to do, and it happily followed suit. When Ilya raised her hand slightly, the snake lifted its head, and when she moved it to the side, it followed the motion. Then she snapped her fingers lightly, the snake coiled tighter, like it was in a show. No way, Rayan muttered from somewhere behind me. Are you this good? Or was this thing trained before? Both, Ilya said, smiling. She's trained for sure. By who? I asked automatically. I'm not an elven seer, she shrugged, and it doesn't matter. What matters is, she snapped her fingers again, pointing to the ground, and the snake lowered its head immediately. She listens to orders, meaning this is a domesticated one, and knowing Merrick, who knows who will come looking for it, boss. Best to get rid of it. Fuck, I moaned, rubbing my face. The fat fuck gave us some hot contraband he couldn't pawn himself, huh? No wonder he slipped away so fast. Well, Rian said slowly, not knowing whether he should laugh or not. That was something. Yeah, Kravik grunted. We just got gifted a monster who has an owner looking for it. Damn. Boys, Ilya said again, scratching the snake lightly under its jaw. We got a sweetheart, not a monster. I would love to keep it, because this one isn't a demon. But until we know whose snake it was previously, we can't. Luckily, that was never the plan, right, boss? Her rat squeaked in absolute agreement, of course, as they looked at me. Right, I sighed, looking back at them. Get it bundled up, and Ilya, you are coming with us to keep it tamed. We will deliver it to its new owner and wash our hands of it. Before anyone comes looking and asking questions, Chapter 112, Disciple, end of Volume 1. By the time we reached Brannock Street, I was already questioning every decision that had brought me to this point. I just couldn't tell if he was insane or playing a character. I was trying to decide without much success while walking through Velgrada in broad daylight with Lyra at my side, carrying fresh pastries she had made, while Ilya, Kravik, and Rayan brought up the rear, bringing the crate with the massive white snake in it. And of course, I was carrying her new alchemy set and the Murin book Celine had given me. Looking over my shoulder, as far as I could tell, the thing was perfectly calm. Every now and then, its red eyes peeked through a gap in the covering we had on its cage, and I swear it looked more curious than threatening. I was halfway expecting it to stick its head out of the cage and start panting like a dog taking a car ride. As for Ilya's rat, that poor bastard had spent the entire trip trying to escape, but then he always realized he really liked his master and consistently came back, following Ilya around. I think it was currently hidden somewhere under her coat, squeaking at her, probably praying she would leave already. Your rat is going to go mute, I said, chuckling. With that much squeaking, his throat will give out. He's being dramatic, Ilya answered, patting the lump in her coat, only for her rat to squeak again, louder than ever before. Well, he says he is not being dramatic, she added after a pause. So maybe he is more like stubborn. Of course he does, because rats can talk, Kravik grunted, rolling his eyes. Every animal can, you just have to listen. Ilya snapped at him. After chugging a barrel of rum, yeah, Kravik muttered, making Rien chortle, while Ilya was beginning to fume. Lyra elbowed me lightly when I was about to say something, stopping me from fanning the flames, though she was also smiling. I simply shrugged and glanced at her as she carefully held the basket of pastries, covered with a clean cloth. It smelled unfairly good, too good to give it to Brannick. Sour cream donuts, chocolate parfaits packed into little clay jars, and a cheesecake that she had made, waking up way too early for me to even realize she was gone from the Swan. Honestly, if Brannick refused us after this, I would throw him into his own cauldron and turn up the heat, and see how long it takes for a human to melt. You remembered everything? I asked her. Yes, Lyra replied, smiling. 20 sour cream donuts, 20 chocolate parfaits, and 1 cheesecake. Let's hope he remembers too. I also brought extra. Really? I raised my brows. Why? Because it's Brannick. Ugh. Okay. That's fair. When his place came into view, I felt my soul sigh because the building now looked like it was needing only one strong gust of wind, and then it would collapse into a pile of trash. The crooked door had a new scorch mark, and one of the windows was cracked in a shape that looked suspiciously like a handprint. Something purple had dried along the outer wall in a long streak that led up toward the roof, meaning either a potion had exploded upward or Brannick had somehow created a sentient liquid and taught it to climb or whatever. This place should be guaranteed, Kravik muttered at once. It has character, Lyra said, trying to sound positive. It has diseases, I argued, and before she could defend the place further, we heard a hissing voice. We all looked at the snake, but it wasn't its doing. It was coming from inside. Then there was a scream, but it wasn't human-like. It was more akin to grinding metal. Of course, Kravik and Rien drew their weapons. Relax, I raised a hand, sounding unsure. That's normal. You sure? They both asked. No. But then I walked up to the door and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something crashed inside, followed by Brannick's voice, ending the whining and grinding noises. If you are debt collectors, I died yesterday. I haven't paid your taxes and won't start now, you unfilial son of mine. Huh? We all looked at each other, that one line giving us way too much to think about, but I wasn't even daring to think anything he said could have any real truth in it before being confirmed by other things. Brannick. I closed my eyes and forced myself to be calm. It's me, Auriel. Silence. Probably thinking who I was, but then I heard his footsteps. Huh. It sounded uneven, accompanied by the unmistakable drag of something across the floor, knocking into things. Finally, the door opened a crack, and one bloodshot eye stared out at me. Then it moved to Lyra and landed on the food in her hand. You brought dessert. Good to see where your priorities are, I said, shrugging, watching as the door opened fully. Brannick looked worse than the last time we saw him. His hair stuck out in every direction, one side singed shorter than the other. He wore 3 shirts, none buttoned correctly, but crisscrossed through the holes they had, and one glove was on his right hand, singed at every fingertip. There was a streak of green powder on his cheek, and his eyebrows looked uneven, as if one had just begun growing back. Fresh? He sniffed, humming with pleasure. Of course, Lyra said, lifting it slightly, handing it over. Perfect. Then his gaze finally moved past her gift, right to the cage behind us, and for the first time ever, he froze, and his eyes sharpened, which was surprising to see. All the nonsense on his face fell away for that moment, and he actually looked lucid and aware. Oh, he whispered, licking his lips. Then he stepped forward slowly, ignoring me. Kravik, ignoring everything except the hidden cage. She's calm, Ilya said, clearly a bit worried, first time seeing the crazed old man. Don't spook her. Amateur. Brannick's eyes flicked to her and snapped his fingers, pointing at her. You can stay alive. Probably. Maybe. Depends on your soup habits. Excuse me? She asked, both angry and lost at what was happening. Later, Brannick waved her away, and he crouched near the cage and lifted one corner of the cloth. Immediately the snake's white head rose from inside as it flicked its tongue once at him, watching as Brannick inhaled sharply. Looking at his face from the side for a second, I thought he was about to cry. "My love," he whispered. "Beautiful idiot." Suddenly, the snake nudged the bars, trying to get to him. "Hello," he said softly, his voice suddenly gentler than I had ever heard it. "Yes, yes, yes, yes. You are not the one I had, but you are her cousin's 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 cousin. I think." I looked at Lyra, wanting to say something, but she just looked back at me while Kravik mouthed, "What?" causing me to simply shrug. By then, Brannick had thrown the cloth back fully and was inspecting the snake, and he looked at her scales, eyes, jaw, tongue movement, muscle tension, tail thickness, and probably 7 other things I didn't even realize. 3 years old, he muttered. No, 4, 3.5. You were fed well. Too well? No, not bloated, don't mind me, dear, but you will need to get a better diet. Yes, good muscle. No stress shedding? Perfect. I can see no scale rot either. Red eyes, clear. Southern Island variant? No, close, close. Bred from it. But you are not from the island. Ha, domesticated. Not that it is a bad thing, dear. My old partner was also like that. Venom glands intact? Better be. Some idiot breeders removed them. Then he suddenly stood up, waving at us. Inside, quickly, before idiots like the taxman and other devils smell value and come asking questions. That, I began, is the first sane thing you've said. Of course, we brought the cage inside, which was easier said than done because Brannick's home had not been designed for furniture, people, or proper habitation. Somehow, there were more shelves than walls since I was last here, and half of them were stacked with jars containing things that were better left unnamed. I wouldn't be surprised if he had some shrunken dwarf gloins here somewhere. Lyra stepped carefully, still holding the pastries, trying to find a place to put them down. Rien and Kravik refused to enter fully until Ilya and the snake were inside, waiting for Brannick to clear a space on the floor by kicking a pile of trash out of the way. Then, once the cage was placed down, Brannick opened it without hesitation. "Hey!" Kravik barked at him, but the snake slid out already, its massive body uncoiling in a smooth wave of white scales. She moved like a living rope, except this rope was thick enough to crush a man and had venomous murder fangs. Now free, her head rose, turning toward each of us, then toward Brannick, and we watched as the snake approached him, then nudged his chest. "Oh, you stupid silk rope, I love you already." "She is friendly," Ilya said confidently, though she still watched every movement, ready to try and save the crazed old man. But he just crouched down and scratched under the snake's jaw. I was actually amazed how the snake closed her eyes and lowered her head slightly, pressing into the touch, enjoying it. In the meantime, Lyra finally set the basket down on the least questionable table, so the food wouldn't turn into spoiled sludge the moment it touched the filth in this place. "I baked them fresh this morning," Lyra said when Brannick's eyes opened, looking at her again. "You may yet survive my instructions." So, that made me speak up, because it was time to get down to business. "We got your snake," I pointed at it. "We brought your sweets. Does that satisfy your condition?" "Mm-hmm." Brannick stood slowly, still petting the snake with one hand. "Yes." Then he turned toward Lyra fully, and for once his eyes looked clear. "You know, I had one before. Long ago," he muttered, looking towards a wall where there was the same poster he gave us, with the bunny woman and the snake. Same line, with a bit snappier temper. Lived 12 years. Ha! They usually last 10 to 15, if not squeezed too hard for their venom. This one is young. She will have a good life." Then he shook his head and glanced back at Lyra. "Now you." "Yes?" She straightened while the rest of us just watched. "You want to learn?" "I do." "You want real alchemy?" he asked seriously. "You want to be an actual alchemist and not a charlatan?" "Yes," Lyra said again. "I want to learn real alchemy." "We'll see." Brannick pointed toward the back of the room. "But for that, You will have to move in. Excuse me, I interjected myself, raising my voice almost a whole octave. You. Move in, here, a few months. He repeated, still looking at Lyra. No, I said, but then Lyra fidgeted. Auriel. No, I repeated at once, absolutely not. Boy, Brannock finally looked at me, his brows lifting. You want her to learn? Yes. Then she stays. No. Then she doesn't learn. He said with a shrug, it is that simple. You are a distraction, and if she wants to learn, there only have to be two things on her mind. Alchemy and herself. Not you, not money, not gambling, not baby-making, just her and alchemy. The room went quiet very quickly, and although both Rian and Kravik held the hilt of their weapons, I was standing still, looking into Brannock's eyes, knowing he was dead serious. I also saw how Lyra looked between us, her expression caught between shock and worry. Then, before I could say anything, Brannock jabbed a finger toward his work tables. Alchemy is not a hobby you just go and pick up. Not if you want real results, you have to live it. If she leaves every night to warm your bed and kiss your worries away, her mind splits from its focus. Half here, half there. Fully bad. Dangerous. Alchemy kills distracted students, and it will try to kill her at every step. It doesn't give away its secrets for free and will eliminate the unserious nobodies. I hated how much sense he made. You can come to the Swan, I said. We can build you a workshop, better than this. There is no better than this, he snapped at me, making me lean back in shock. Lyra whispered. How long? A few months, he said simply. How many? I asked firmly. Brannock shrugged, looking between us. Until I say so, she is ready to brew without supervision. That is not a number, I said, gritting my teeth. Alchemy doesn't count in days, boy. I turned toward Lyra and watched as she looked at the tools and how her fingers tightened around the edge of her sleeve. I want to learn, she said quietly, and I closed my eyes for a second. I want to be useful. How often can I visit? I asked Brannock without looking away from her, knowing that I won't be the kind of husband who stops his wife from pursuing what she really wants to do. No visitations. My head turned slowly at that. What? No disruptions. The more I looked into his eyes, the more I understood he wasn't crazy. At least not when it came to alchemy. Then I sighed and pulled her into my arms, feeling her bury her face against my chest, and for a moment I held her tighter than I probably should have. I don't like this, I whispered, but… Ha! I know. She muttered. Sorry. You'd better become terrifyingly good at alchemy. Heh. She laughed softly against me, though her voice trembled. I will. And don't drink anything unless he drinks it first. At that, Lyra lifted her head and kissed me, with glistening, teary eyes. It will pass by quickly. I promise, she whispered. I will learn it all. I know. I smiled, then looked at Brannock. Make sure she doesn't get disfigured, old man, or I will gut you. It will depend on her, he answered without fear. I already told you. Alchemy won't let useless people access its secrets. But, he added, seeing I was ready to open my mouth again, I know you prepared her well. His eyes flashed. I hadn't worked with Murian recipes and sets for a long time. He muttered, making my eyes widen. It will be nostalgic.